Good evening, everybody. This is a regular meeting of the Zoning Board of Adjustment for April 19th, 2023. Notice has been given in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act by posting a copy of the notice on the first floor of the municipal building and sending a copy to the Montclair Times, Star Ledger, and Herald News. This is a public hearing in which any members of the public are welcome to attend. The meeting agenda is available on the Montclair website, as is a link to the township's YouTube channel where the hearing can be viewed live or after the fact. The hearing is also being televised on Channel 34. I'm going to call roll now. Mr. Harrison?
Here.
Mr. McCullough?
Here.
Mr. Caulfield?
Here.
Mr. Church?
Here.
Ms. Harris?
Here.
Mr. Simon is here. Mr. Vieira?
Here.
Mr. Sullivan?
Here.
And Ms. Martineau and Mr. Moore are excused this evening.
We have the minutes of the March 15th meeting in a practice which no one should expect to be repeated again. I sent around changes so I can read them more quickly. On page 5, line 33, change the sentence. It starts in the preceding line. Several board members were concerned that the applicant did not sufficiently explore the feasibility of having the entrance for the basement unit from the shared front hall to comply with the conditional use requirement. And then on line 37, insert the word conditional before use at the end. And on line 42, change me to be. And does anyone else have any other changes to the minutes? And if not, would someone like to move approval?
I'll move the approval of the minutes of March 16th.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, and then we have the resolution for the property at 7 Clinton Avenue. I have a change at the bottom of page 1, the finding number 4, have it read, the previous garage was demolished and currently being reconstructed in the approximate same location with a modified footprint. And then on number 11, reword that to read, an image from 2020 demonstrates that, and then continuing with the rest of the sentence. And then condition 3, insert the word at least after the garage shall remain at least the existing 4.33 feet. Any other changes to that resolution? If not, would someone like to make a motion to approve it as amended?
I'll approve the resolution as amended. I'll move to approve.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? I don't have any changes to the Mount Vernon Road resolution. Does anyone else have any changes? Does someone want to move approval of the resolution?
So moved. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, and then we have the resolution adopting the annual report. Is there any discussion on the items in the annual report?
No.
If not, someone want to make a motion to approve the annual report and sending it to the relevant township officials?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So the first application of that is of Dish Wireless LLC. This is an application to install telecommunications equipment on property located at 622-624 Valley Road. The property is in the NC Neighborhood Commercial Zone and is designated on the township tax maps as Lot 3 in Block 2601 pursuant to NJSA 40:55D-70D3, the proposal requires a variance from Montclair Code Section 347-171C4A, which requires the applicant provide documentary evidence regarding the need for additional wireless telecommunications antennas. Proposal requires a variance from Montclair Code Section 347-1C4C, which requires that the height of the antenna shall not exceed the top of the parapet wall, penthouse, or chimney to which they're attached. Is the notice in order and our taxes paid?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I have a conflict on this matter, so I have to step down. Arthur Neese will serve as attorney for the zoning board in this matter.
So I think we should have a motion to designate Mr. Neese to serve as a conflict attorney, just so board members may not know he's the planning board attorney in the
I'll make
township.
that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Art? Want to give your appearance, and we're ready to go.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Kevin Jones from Zublat and Jones, outside counsel for the applicant, Dish Wireless LLC. Dish Wireless is an FCC licensed carrier who is seeking, as the chairman mentioned, conditional use variance approval for a rooftop telecom site at the subject property located 622-624 Valley Road, also known as Block 2601, Lot 3. The property sits in the NC Neighborhood Commercial Zone District, wherein wireless telecom facilities on rooftops are permitted as conditional uses. Applicant does not meet all of the conditions of the ordinance because of the nature of the building, the unique structure of the building. The applicant was unable to install the antennas at or lower than the parapet height of the building. The applicant did install the antennas, is proposing, I should say, to install the antennas at the lowest height necessary to meet its radio frequency objectives. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about Dish Wireless. Dish is now on its way to become the fourth largest carrier in the United States. You may recall that recently Sprint and T-Mobile merged, and one of the reasons that merger took so long was because the FCC wanted to help create a fourth carrier. They didn't want to just have three carriers and maybe perhaps avoid a monopoly type of situation. So with that, Dish Wireless, who had acquired a great deal of spectrum over the years, launched its network. So it has multiple phases. This is phase one of the network. The FCC committed to the FCC, Dish committed to the FCC that by, I think it was June 14th, 2022, it would have 20% of the United States covered. So mission accomplished. Now for the second part of phase one, Dish committed to the FCC that it will have 70% of the United States covered by June 14th of this year, 2023. So as you can guess, that's an ambitious endeavor, and Dish is striving to build out its network. It's building out the first of its kind, revolutionary cloud-based, completely cloud-based 5G network. It's a little different than the other wireless networks. It's completely 5G, and it's also known as a greenfield network. There are no Dish sites really around, particularly in Montclair. This is the first of 4 proposed sites in this particular jurisdiction. But this is one of the sites that requires land use approval because it requires a conditional use variance. Dish typically looks for existing structures or towers that have wireless facilities mounted on them. They look for sites that are permitted either by right or by way of a conditional use, such as the site in the NC zone. So with that said, the antenna installation that the applicant is proposing will consist of 9 panel antennas, 3 separate sectors. The alpha and beta sector, which face Valley Road, will be at a top height at about, 44 feet. And the gamma sector, which will face the rear of the building in the parking lot area, will be a little bit taller at a little over 52 feet. Again, the equipment had to be placed a little bit above the roof parapet. Co-location on the side of the building, known as flush mounting, was unavailable due to the nature of the building. I have our engineer will opine and discuss why that was not possible. But again, as I mentioned earlier, the applicant is proposing an antenna installation with the minimum height necessary to fulfill its coverage objective. So with that, I'd like to call my first witness. We could swear him in, Mr. Pavan Madahar. He's a senior RF engineer for Dish Wireless. And he also has some exhibits, I think. I have copies here we'll pass around, and he'll put them on a big board for you.
You want to mark them collectively all as A1?
Absolutely. I'm just going to write them on the first one. And can I pass it to you, Tommy, and then we can circulate? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
But you don't pre-mark the application or anything?
You want to put them on the big?
Okay. Can you spell your name?
Pavan, Madahar.
Yeah, okay.
W-A-N. Last name Madahar, M-A-D-A-H-H-A-R.
S-H-R.
No, M-A-D-A-H-A-R.
I'm not getting the X. Is that an X? H.
Yeah, no, H.
H-A-R.
Oh, it is.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Thank you.
No light. Tommy, is there a wireless mic for him to stand up? There was the other night. While he does that, we'll get you qualified in. Okay, Mr. Madahar, he's going to look for a wireless mic for you. Could you briefly, if you could, state your professional qualifications for the board?
So,
Before we do that.
Yes, sir.
How about if I swear Tommy in?
Yeah.
Oh,
And then swear in the witness?
got it.
Mrs. Spilia, do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Would you please state your full name and business affiliation for the record?
Tommy Sibilia, Assistant Planner for the Township of Montclair and Secretary to the Board of Adjustment.
Thank you. And Mr. Madahar, do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
And would you please state your full name and business affiliation for the record?
Yeah, my name is Pavan Madahar, and I am senior RF engineer with the Dish Wireless.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Madahar, you've designed, I guess we could say, thousands of wireless installations, such as the subject installation. And you've testified at land use boards before as an RF engineer. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And could you state your professional qualifications for the board?
So I have more than 25 years of telecom experience. Worked with different carriers, AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, Sprint, doing RF design and optimization. Beside, I have like other aspects in the RF engineering, like interference hunting and microwave design, so and data collection. So I have did RF design and also did testification in New York, Suffolk County.
Does the board accept Mr. Madahar's qualifications as an RF engineer in the form of telecommunications?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Madahar, are you familiar with the FCC requirements with regard to MPE exposure, which is maximum permissible exposure?
Yes.
And just wanted to make sure it's clear that Dish Wireless will comply with any and all FCC standards as they relate to maximum permissible exposure. Is that fair to say?
Yes,
Okay, and Dish will submit what's called an EME report, electromagnetic frequency emissions report, prior to issuance of should this application get approved, prior to the building permit application. Is that fair to say?
yes.
Okay, any questions with regard to emissions? Before, I'm going to move right on to the need for the site and why we need the site here.
Just go on, finish his testimony, then we'll ask questions.
Okay. Okay, well, Dish Wireless has a gap in coverage. One of the reasons we need new sites is a gap in coverage. I think
Right,
here, all of Montclair is a gap. Is that fair to say?
yes,
So as I mentioned, you heard my opening statement. This is a greenfield build, right? Dish Wireless doesn't have any sites in Montclair. Is that fair to say?
yeah, Dish is greenfield.
So if you could you show where this site is? Before we do that, I'm sorry. Dish also has 3 other sites proposed in Montclair. Is that correct?
Yeah, total of 4 sites in Montclair.
So could you show the board first, obviously, the proposed site location on your map and the location of the 3? Oh, it's already on. Sorry.
So this is the proposed site, and this is Montclair boundary. And we have 4 sites. This is the proposed which we are discussing. The other one is this at the top, and 2 other. This is like here, and the last one is 1736.
Okay, and as you heard me say, obviously by those maps, Dish does have a huge gap in its proposed coverage. Is that fair to say?
Yes, no site is on air. So at this position, at this time, there is no on-air sites. All are proposed.
Okay. And when you search for sites, you heard me mention that Dish typically uses, searches for existing structures. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Or towers, obviously preferably a
Yeah, so
communications
we
tower.
prefer towers and the rooftop where other carriers are sitting.
So in this particular center of research ring area, were any such structures available?
So there was another rooftop with the carrier, so that was also there.
Right, but we're talking 630?
Yes,
Yeah, and that had multiple carriers, so we weren't able to site on that building. Is that fair to say?
right.
So the next best structure was the structure an existing tall
This
structure.
rooftop, yes.
Right, this one. Also, you're familiar with the ordinance requirement that requires an applicant to place its antennas at or lower than the parapet or rooftop of the subject property.
Yes.
Were you able to do that here and get the propagations that you need for your?
So if we follow the ordinance, we will not have the RF objective. The propagation will be reduced a lot, and the coverage will be shrinking.
Okay, is it fair to say this is the minimum height necessary that we've proposed here to meet your
Yeah,
objectives?
this is the minimum height.
And what type of what type of coverage, I should, will it be in building? Could you maybe
So mostly we
expand on
have
that?
like in-building and the in-vehicle coverage.
And what
So
about
that's what-
pedestrians walking up and down?
Pedestrians are also there, so that coverage is little more. But we are looking for the in-vehicle and in-building coverage.
Okay, so we talked about the existing gap in coverage, we talked about the proposed sites. So in your opinion, once this site, assuming that this site gets approved and the other 3 proposed sites in Montclair get approved, will you meet your, or be near your 70% objective? Will that help you
Yeah,
reach that goal?
so that will meet our coverage objective of 70%.
Okay, can you show the board what it will look like when just this site is on air in
Just this
terms of
site.
coverage? And explain what that actually depicts on your chart. And this, for the record, this is Exhibit A1. This is going to be page,
So this is the
4.
propagation with this site only. So you see this is on Valley Road. So until like 7-8 block up northeast it is going, and in the west it is going like little away from Upper Mountain Avenue, And this is the coverage only with this site.
Okay, so if, you heard me mention earlier, there are proposed sites in and around Montclair.
Yeah.
Let's say all of those get approved and all of those are constructed and fired up and on air. What will the propagations look like then?
So with all the sites on air, the propagation will look like this. So all these sites are on air and including all on the neighboring towns. So then we will have the coverage this. So this will have 70% of the POPs covered.
So in your professional opinion, will that have reliable in-building, in-vehicle, and pedestrian coverage?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, nothing further for this witness. So if the board has any questions before I move to our engineer.
Mr. McCulloch, do you have any questions?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Madahar, for your testimony. I have a few questions for you. First of all, can you explain what are the services that DISH actually provides?
So Dish is providing broadband services on 5G. So it will be having, Dish is proposing at least 35 Mbps of throughput data. So when you download, it will have minimum of 35 Mbps, maybe more.
And this correlates to
So
television and
Phones.
streaming and all
on
of
the
that? or what
phone,
is
you
it?
can you stream like you play the YouTube video, and also that is for the speed.
I see. Okay.
So you play some other on the phone, and beside we will have Warner calls,
Explain to them.
normal calls,
Okay.
yeah, voice call. So voice call will be based on Warner.
Okay. And currently, are there DISH customers in Montclair?
So that I can't tell, means I don't have the exact information from RF engineer point of view, but they have the customer of the Boost, so those will be our first customers.
So
So that-
Boost customers would be the first.
Yes. And the other, I think, a sales guy, they can provide a better answer for that.
So maybe, Mr. McCullough, I can maybe
Yes.
just help with that. So Dish is proposing, like I said, to be the fourth carrier. So Dish is going to, once they reach that 70% goal on June 14th of this year, then they'll be ready to start selling devices. So you'll start seeing an advertising blitz, you'll start seeing devices available. So you can, it'll be comparable to an AT&T, a T-Mobile, or a Verizon type of service, wherein, and correct me if I'm wrong, you'll be able to make voice calls, video calls, and transmit and receive data through a 5G network. Is that
Right, that's
correct?
right.
So in other words, is it fair to say, like, if I had a Verizon 5G phone now with 5G capabilities, upload and download speed, and you know, fast internet, would this compete with that? Would you be able to
Yes.
provide a similar service to your future customers?
Exactly.
So basically, if, just looking at your presentation, in terms of areas of coverage that currently exist, with Montclair being an exception, I guess Montclair is somewhat of a DISH desert, would you, I mean, where there really isn't,
So,
I mean, that's why you're feeling the necessity of
exactly.
providing this service?
Right. So there is no coverage at present, I see in this. So there is no coverage. Once we have the site, then we will have the coverage, which I showed in this slide. So
Okay.
this is the individual coverage, and this is when all the sites will be on here.
So when I look at this particular presentation,
Yeah.
and I see the communities all around Montclair that have pretty ample DISH coverage,
Right.
I guess the question that occurs to me is there not some way for you to increase the reach of the DISH services in those communities to be able to cover, to provide some of that 70% coverage in Montclair, or you actually have to have the towers in Montclair in order to provide that coverage?
So we need to have the tower or the rooftop site in Montclair to provide the coverage. So this is a cellular services. So each cell is being covered by one site. So we need to have these at least 4 sites to provide the coverage in Montclair. These neighboring sites will not be able to provide the coverage.
Even if you increase the technology, it wouldn't be able to do that, is what you're
Yes.
saying?
So Pavan, maybe you could, so how far, just to help maybe answer this?
Yes.
How far does each site propagate?
Generally around
Generally
like 0.8 miles or maybe 0.9 miles.
0.9.
Sometimes if it is like other area, maybe 1 mile. So it depends upon how the terrain is, how like vegetation is, how much like other like buildings, how many buildings are there.
Mhm.
So it depends on multiple factors. So we have our propagation tool which has all this information and then we calculate. But in general, around like you can say in like area like Montclair, maybe 0.8 mile coverage.
So the variation of topography is a
Yes.
factor in terms
Right.
of the ability to provide coverage. Can you explain what the difference is between the green and the orange and the white?
So green is the this dark green. This is the in-building coverage.
In building, okay.
Yeah. So like if you are in like a home, you will have the coverage. And the light green is where in the vehicle, if you are in the vehicle, that will have the coverage. And this orange, last one, this is on street. If you are like walking with your phone, so that is the coverage. But if you are in the car, you may not have the coverage.
But one other thing, just by way of clarification, all of these sites aren't currently on air just yet, right, surrounding Montclair?
Yeah, no
But
site
they're
is
all
on here.
kinda
No
in the
site
works
is-
now. They're all kind of currently got the, in process
Proposed,
and
yes.
proposed, right?
And is it your assessment at this point that this particular proposal for Valley Road is the only one that would require a variance?
So far in this jurisdiction, yes, sir.
Yes, okay. Thank you.
Mr. Caulfield?
Thank you, Chair.
So 630 Valley is a building that's kind of the tallest building in that area, and that has some, I guess, satellite or some of the coverage.
Other
right,
carriers
doing
are there.
some cellular.
Yeah.
But your system's much bigger, right? You need a bigger, like, it looks like looking at your plans, like your roof, like this is going to take up a good portion of the roof, right? That 630 couldn't necessarily offer you guys?
So, if we see from the Google Earth, there are multiple carriers.
Okay.
So maybe Kevin can provide.
Yeah,
We try
I can
to
have our
get in
engineer
touch-
answer that question, but
So we
just,
try to get in
Yeah.
touch with the landlord, but he
Oh.
didn't
Yeah.
respond.
so that built, because of the numerous amount of carriers on that rooftop, this installation, there wasn't enough room. There's interference issues. If you're too close to other antennas, aren't there interference
Yeah, it
issues
will
that
have
may
interference,
arise?
yeah.
So every phone company has to have their own technology?
No, basically technologies are like earlier it was GSM, then CDMA, then EVDO came, then LTE came. Now 5G has come.
Yeah.
So Dish is a standalone 5G, and the other carriers, they are non-standalone. So slightly different technology.
Okay.
But all the carriers may have the same concept.
Okay.
So like 5G by like AT&T, T-Mobile, they have the same technology.
Okay.
Ours is little bit standalone.
Do you sense that, since we're all getting to 5G, that all these companies are going to have upgrade all their equipment to 5G? Like,
Yeah,
the building at 630 is probably antiquated in some sense, that they're going to have to upgrade their...
Yeah,
their
so I
equipment.
think, I don't know about 630, but all the carriers are going towards 5G. And many carriers have already transmitting on the 5G network.
Okay. Another, one last question. The surrounding towns like Verona and West Orange are much higher in elevations. Montclair is the pivot point to cover all those surrounding communities, even though those other communities are much higher in elevation in that sense?
So, means, all those elevations, we have our propagation tool, which has all these information. How much elevation is there, how much vegetation.
But would you think like you'd want to put something on a high, like Verona is a higher locate, like it's much higher than us. Would it be
Yeah.
easier to put something up there, like if you go up in those
So the
areas?
distance is very high. So it will not have coverage even if it is in Verona. So
But there's
distance
4
is very
sites
high.
in Montclair that are going to be proposed that's going to cover all the surrounding towns. Are the other towns going to have dish networks as well?
Yes, so
Okay.
all these towns, if you see, we have proposed different sites.
Okay.
In other towns.
Thank you.
Ms. Harris?
Thank you. You mentioned earlier that if you lower the antennas, that coverage will shrink. Could you explain that a little bit?
So, currently, we are doing the sled mount on the rooftop. So, antenna, if we bring it down, then it will be shooting on the roof. All our propagation will be on the roof only. So, it will not go on the streets and other areas.
So the other locations that you have in Montclair, what are those installations? Are they also on buildings as well?
So I
or are
think
there-
the other, so one is monopole, if you see.
Yeah,
the
page 2 of
second
your,
page two.
has the address and how tall they are. And you said one is a monopole, a tower on 1 Normal Avenue. Second one is this site, and the third is 36 Hawthorne Place, the 64-foot building. And the fourth is 641 Bloomfield Avenue, 74-plus
So-
foot building.
So these don't require variances, so I'm assuming that they meet all the requirements in terms of being lower than the parapet?
Well, not necessarily. They may have, they all have existing wireless carriers, so the federal regulations provide certain types of co-location rights. Once certain criteria are met, then a rooftop with other wireless, FCC licensed wireless carriers becomes what's called a base station. And then the carriers, subsequent carriers have to follow different criteria there. But all of those have to go to the Montclair zoning department. Any in the historic district may have to go to the Historic Preservation Commission, but may not necessarily need variances.
Okay. But still, on those buildings, those other 2 rooftops, are the antennas proposed to be higher or at the parapet level?
So they are higher than the parapet. For example, this is rooftop and we put our antenna here. So it's gonna, the parapet is not gonna have the propagation. It will be stopped by this parapet wall. So we have to put it up so that it can propagate.
Got it.
And no immediate obstruction should be there.
Okay, so all the rooftop installations, the antennas will be above?
Above the
Are proposed to
parapet.
be above the
Yeah.
parapet, okay. And this map that you're showing here, is that propagation just from the Montclair antennas, or is it from all of the surrounding antennas
No,
as well?
all are propagating. This side is propagating, this side, all the sides are propagating.
Okay,
You want to show just this site again? There's one he has with just this site
but
shown.
there's not one showing just the Montclair sites?
Not just the Montclair sites, no, he wanted to do a composite showing the Montclair sites, this one, the 3 proposed, and the surrounding area, to give you an idea of what his expectations are for the network.
Okay.
Is that true?
Yes.
Okay, and then the areas that are orange versus green, you said orange is for people on the street? if you're
On the
walk-
street, if you are walking on the street, so you will have the coverage.
And so, does that mean people in buildings or cars won't have coverage
They
in those
might
zones?
not have the coverage. So only like this light green, if they are in the vehicle, so they will have the coverage. And it's a dark green, if you are in your home or in the building, you will have the coverage.
And why is that, why are those areas not covered?
So once the RF is there, so like vehicle, the attenuation by the vehicle inside. If you are in the car, the attenuation by the vehicle material is less. if we see the, compared to what is in the building. So building will have like structure, it will have lot of RF losses. So the RF will reduce once it comes inside. So same vehicle will have lot of less losses compared to what is in the, for the buildings.
But is it like topography that determines where you have certain types of coverage or where you don't? Like why are some zones not completely?
So yeah, it depends upon topography and vegetation.
Okay, so the lower the topography, if it's a lower area, or if it's a higher elevation, what is determining where the cover is?
For example, there is a hilly area. So for example, this is a site, and like within 0.2 mile, there is a small hill. So behind the hill, there will be no coverage.
Okay.
So if the terrain is like going up and down, so the coverage will, it will impact the coverage.
Okay.
So this propagation tool, it has all those information. It runs different algorithms to provide these propagation.
And how does the vegetation affect it?
So vegetation, same, all these vegetation, they have different losses. If the tree is there, how much tree leaves are there, and how thick are those. So the RF losses will increase or decrease accordingly. If there are like thick forest is there, and which type of trees are there. So all those algorithms are in our propagation tool. So basically how much losses will be with, for this vegetation. So more the losses, the coverage will reduce.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Church, do you have any questions?
Not now.
Mr. Simon?
Hi. How were these locations selected? Because I believe you told my colleague that the other proposed sites, the other two proposed sites will also require a variance when that time comes. So were there any configurations which, or locations that you considered that would not be on rooftops requiring, like, essentially, why not use monopoles in locations where you would not require a variance?
Before he answers that, I want to, on page 2, this is the only one of those 4, so far, as far as we're aware, that's going to require variances. The other ones, one is a monopole, and the other 2 are rooftops with existing wireless facilities already mounted.
But
So
based on
those
this-
are base station facilities pursuant to federal law.
So basically,
I'm
we
sorry.
have to provide the coverage to the population, which is around that area. So as I told you earlier, one cell site, it has very limited coverage. It can't have like coverage very long, maybe around 0.8 miles.
No, I understand that, but you said that because of the design of the antennas, it has to reach over the parapet wall,
Yeah,
which means that anything mounted on any rooftop is going to be over that wall,
right.
which means you're going to be back here for the other locations for a variance the same way. Because by your own statement, it has to be above the parapet wall. And the ordinance is that any antenna has to be below the wall.
But, excuse me, our engineer will testify as to why that's only the case in this building. Some buildings, you're able to flush mount the antennas on the side of the building, but because of the way that this building is built, there's windows, there's other architectural features that preclude the ability for the applicant to flush mount or
Okay,
place the antennas.
Fair enough. So what other locations were considered that would not, that could be flush mounted? And if, based on the heat map that you presented, being that this is the first site, why start with a site or that's going to require a variance as opposed to reconfiguring the possible locations to have adequate coverage without requiring a variance right out the gate?
So that's what other was this 6:30. So we were trying to get hold of landlord, and he did not
Yeah.
respond.
And even if so, I believe our architect, our engineer will tell you, and he'll testify that there was too many carriers up there for this installation. So the next thing we did, as I mentioned earlier, is look for areas where antennas are permitted by conditional use. So even though we don't meet that one condition, the jurisdiction, Montclair has already determined that this is an appropriate, a rooftop in the NC zone is an appropriate place for a rooftop facility. Due to the nature of this building, the way this building is built, the architectural, as I mentioned earlier, we're unable to meet that condition in terms, in terms of being lower than the parapet wall.
Okay, so, excuse me. So looking at the map, the distance between the antenna on Normal Avenue versus the other two, which are on the southern side, that's a pretty big gap. So this upper Montclair antenna seems to be carrying a significant coverage area compared to the others, which has more overlap, right? Am I looking at this correctly? If you look at I'm just looking at the raw map.
Are you talking about the 107-foot monopole on one?
Yeah,
Normal Avenue?
looking at this first page,
Yes.
the distance between, 1712 and 1642 to the north and 14 and 36 to the south, it seems that it's kind of, this location is kind of isolated compared to the overlap from any other potential antenna. And this is why I'm just questioning, like, why is this one so isolated? Were there any other configurations considered that would provide some overlap? Because if you were to take 712 out, this particular antenna out, you couldn't do anything. There'd be a huge hole.
Yeah, so one is theoretical and other is what's in the reality. So
Right.
we would like to have the site here, but there is no other structure, no tower, no rooftop where we can put our antennas. So then comes, like, theoretically, we'll definitely have all these sites same distance. And also, we need to see if we could find any structure there.
So, excuse me, and so what's the difference in the consideration between a rooftop antenna and a pole?
So, pole is, that is a tower, like monopole is there or self-support tower is there. So first preference is to go there.
You're talking about an existing tower?
Yes.
Okay, so you're not just talking about a physical, like a flagpole kind of situation?
This
where
was
you
an
can-
existing communications tower. Can I, just to help, maybe this will help clarify one of the things you were asking. Is antennas, an antenna installation on a 107-foot monopole, will that propagate, because it's so much taller than this one, will that propagate at a longer distance or farther or better than a rooftop site in the middle of town, where you get more?
So it will not have much change, but little bit of more coverage, but not much.
So is it fair to say that your RF team and Dish's RF team strategically located all of these to try to maximize the coverage and
Yeah,
utilizing
so-
existing sites?
Yeah, so beside the propagation, we have to see if any other sites are doing the interference. So then we have to change the antenna height. So multiple factors come into the picture when we decide what should be the antenna where we shall put, like we say, rad center.
The rad center is the circumference of
Yeah.
the
so,
radius of...
For example, this is 6-foot antenna. These are panel antenna, so like 6 foot. And the center, that's what we call rad center, radiation center.
So like dead center of the
Got
antenna.
it. So you're saying the rad center of this pole will be at 41 feet?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's all. That's it.
Mr. Vieira?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question, how many antennas are you proposing to install?
9 antennas.
9 total?
Yeah,
But
total.
are they part of an assembly together, like 3 antennas per assembly, or they are 12 antennas separately?
So one sector, we will have 3 antennas. We will have mount. So 1, 2, 3 for one sector, alpha, and beta 1, 2, 3, 3 antennas, and gamma 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. And they are strategically located in the
Yes,
rooftop?
Exactly.
Almost at the corners of the building,
Yeah.
2 in the front corners and 1 toward the center of the rear
Yeah.
building.
Yep. Do they emit any sound, the antennas?
No sound,
Any lights?
no light.
No lights?
No.
And I guess the question, maybe this is more for the engineer who will testify about exactly what was wrong with 630 Valley. Was it the roof loading criteria or the interference? But I just didn't hear testimony about why 630 didn't work out.
Yeah, our engineer will testify as to
Okay.
why we couldn't install there.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a number of questions, and just to give your engineer a heads up, I think I know the 36 Hawthorne Place has the same number of existing carrier antennas that are on the 630 Valley Road building, and I believe the 641 Bloomfield Avenue, that is also the case, if I'm remembering the address correctly. So I'm going to want an understanding of why those buildings work and 630 Valley Road doesn't work. But let me, as to this witness, so there are a number of other buildings of similar height in the general area and a few that are actually taller than the subject building. Why did you focus on the subject building versus a number of other buildings in the area?
So this building will provide our RF objective. So that's why we chose this site.
Did you look at any other buildings to see if they would meet your RF objective?
So those, on those rooftops, there are no carriers. And those are sitting away from our search ring.
Okay, and, I'm going to ask other witnesses about the impact on the historic district, and some of these buildings would also be in the historic district, but there are, let me approach it a little differently. So the propagation map for just this site shows it reaching virtually to the proposed monopole on Normal Avenue. And so I guess I'm partially wondering why it can't shift further to the south and still meet your objectives and not have the large overlap that's going to be provided with the facility on Normal Avenue. You want to put that exhibit up so you can see what I'm saying? The one that just shows the coverage from,
For only this site?
yes. You see how it goes virtually to this, and there's a little bit of green actually right next to the Normal Avenue site, and the orange goes there. And so I'm wondering, and I'm assuming the Normal Avenue site is going to cover most of that area that's to the north of this site. And I'm trying to understand why you chose this building when there are other buildings that are slightly further south that would seem to not lose any coverage along, going north on Valley Road, and could potentially fill in a little of the gap towards the eastern boundary of the township.
So you are saying the other building is like south of this building?
There's the building, I think the address is 530 Valley Road, which is a 6-story apartment building, and there are 2 apartment buildings on Bellevue Avenue, which are taller than this building.
Because we saw like multiple rooftops sitting away, because here most of the population density is concentrated in this area.
And I'm not moving you very far. The 2 apartments on Bellevue Avenue are right in that same area. They're just out of the historic district, I believe. Would give you better coverage going east.
Where would that be on that map?
That I don't know where.
Where about would that be on the map
It's
here?
between Valley Road and Norwood. across the street from, say, Cashion's.
Yeah. I don't know where it is. I do.
Well, I think that what the chair was saying is, why did we choose this site, I guess, is your
Well,
question.
and, yeah, that, given it is not a tall building, it has, because of the expansion that was recently built, its Valley Road facade is singularly poorly constructed for wall mounting the antennas. I understand why you can't mount it there because of how the front facade is set up, but there are other same-sized buildings along Valley Road that potentially you could flush mount the antennas because they are what I call a normal architecture, brick along the top portion of the building. But then there are other buildings out of the historic district that are relatively close and are taller. And I'm just wondering whether those were looked at, and if not, why not?
So basically, we look around our search ring. So
Can you show the board where your search ring is?
So search ring is surrounding this area like around 0.3 miles.
And what is the search ring? Just explain it.
Search ring is, we give the area, which is search ring, to our SciTech guys. So they go in the field and check if any structure is there in that search ring area.
And how big is the search ring?
0.3 miles.
Okay, I'm pretty sure you pick up these sites, certainly pick up the Bellevue Avenue sites. Are any of the antennas in the other towns operational at this point, or they're all in some stage of going through an approval process?
Yeah, they are in various phases.
Because, I mean, when we first started to get the other carriers coming in many years ago, one of their problems was they had first sited towers along the major highways, the Parkway, Route 3, Route 46, 280, and that affected where they could locate towers in Montclair, and that kind of, led to somewhat limiting their options. You're dealing with a blank slate, yet you, apart from the monopole, you're basically siting your towers, your antennas at the same locations that the other carriers ended up with. And some of them, like 36 Hawthorne, I understand because there aren't a lot of other tall buildings in the area where that is. The Bloomfield Avenue, it's a little curious because there are now a bunch of tall buildings that weren't there when the other carriers were siting. But, if we get an application there, I'll worry about them. But I'm just fundamentally not understanding how you ended up with this building, which presents a number of obstacles in terms of getting a variance because of the historic preservation concerns, and it's not taller than, it's sitting there in the middle of the block, which I assume there are some problems as a result of that with other buildings providing interference, which is maybe part of the reason your coverage to the east is not good.
So, Ms., as I told you earlier, so this area, Ms., the searching is 0.3 miles from this point, and there was another site. We try to co-locate where other carriers are. So that's our first preference. If there is no, then we go to where there is no roof, though there is no carrier. So that's why we went to this rooftop.
I have no further questions.
Now, I may just, if I could, Chairman, maybe if you give us 5 minutes, I do have a DISH representative here, and maybe we can just give you a better picture of what went into the overall selection of this building. Because I know, as he mentioned earlier, 630 would work. Is that fair to say? Yeah. And then we probably wouldn't be in front of this board if they could install on that building. But with that said, they looked for, and again, if you give us 5 or 10 minutes, we'll talk about it internally with my DISH
Do you
representatives
want to
here.
do some other witnesses, and maybe we can come to a more logical place for a break?
Yeah, would you like our engineer first?
Yeah, why don't you do that? I mean, we may have other, there may be
Yeah.
other questions when your
Okay.
engineer,
Yes.
you want to also talk to the DISH representative about.
Fair enough. Any other questions for Mr. Madahar? He can come back and answer more, should you have more.
Any other board members, questions? Okay. Why don't you
Okay.
call your next witness?
Thank you. Next witness is Mr. Jeremy McKeon. He's a professional engineer from the CEO of Azimuth Engineering. My plans here. Let's get him sworn in.
Sir, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Would you please state your full name, and may I ask you to spell your last name and your business affiliation for the record?
Yes, Jeremy McKeon, McKeon. I'm the CEO and General Manager of Azimuth Engineering Group, a engineering firm retained by Dish Wireless.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. McKeon, could you briefly state your professional qualifications for the board?
Yes, I'm a structural engineer by trade, have a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from Lehigh University and a master's degree in structural engineering from Columbia University. I am a professional engineer licensed in the state of New Jersey, as well as 30 other states in the United States, and have testified in front of zoning and planning board hearings throughout New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania.
Does the board accept Mr. McKeown's qualifications as a professional engineer?
Yes.
I'm sorry, you're testifying as a professional engineer, not a structural engineer, not an engineer. Is that your specialty area?
Professional engineer.
Okay, thank you.
So you're a professional engineer as well as a structural engineer, is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, first, you heard me mention this facility. First thing, just to get a few questions out of the way, then we'll get right into the actual details of the facility itself. In terms of the antenna installation, does the general public have access to the facility?
No, it will be on the rooftop of the building, and we'll have signage posted
Right.
at the access door to the rooftop.
And the FCC requires signage on all wireless telecom sites, is that fair to say?
Yes, that is correct.
Does this site generate any glare, dust, smoke, noise, water, or sewage?
No, it does not.
And is it remotely monitored 24 hours a day?
Yes, it is.
So if the site were ever to become damaged or off air or even vandalized, a DISH representative would be notified immediately, is that fair to say?
Yes, that is correct.
And will you perform or will DISH perform probably you, a structural analysis should this site get approved? Or have you already determined that the rooftop is structurally able to accommodate the proposed load of the antennas and the associated equipment?
Yes, we have already completed a structural analysis of the rooftop and the proposed mounts.
And will DISH utilize the existing power and utilities that are already present at this particular location?
So the power will be taken from the existing facility in the basement, and the fiber telecommunications will be is proposed to be brought from an existing pole on the rear of the building.
Okay. And you heard me mention the fact that the ordinance, first of all, did you review the wireless ordinance and the requirements that antennas on existing rooftops are, should be mounted either at or lower than the parapet wall or the roof?
Yes, we have reviewed the ordinances applicable to this location and taken that into account fully with our design.
So were you able to do that here? Were you able to meet that ordinance requirement here that's set forth in the conditional use requirements for the NC zone?
No, and as was alluded to previously, we have looked at the installation of the antennas on the sides of the building and the bulkhead of the building in the rear, and have found that the construction of the parapet walls is not structurally adequate to be able to support the antennas on the exterior of the building for the alpha and beta sectors, which are on the relatively the north and the south side of the building, and then the gamma sector, which is towards the west end of the building, that's proposed on the bulkhead. In the rear of the building has glass windows covering the majority of it that would not allow for the antennas to be installed on the exterior of that side of the building.
So it's your professional opinion, based on your visit to the site, your analysis of the site, that DISH would be unable to flush mount or mount these antennas at any height lower than the proposed height on these drawings?
That is correct, yes. Looking at the rooftop, looking at the full condition of the building and of everything that is necessary for Dish Wireless's installation, the antennas could not be installed any lower.
Okay. And just to expand on I believe, Mr. Vera, I pronounced that right? Mr. Vera's question, could you just briefly explain the configuration of the antennas in 3 sectors of 3 each?
Yes. Yeah, for this, I'll stand up. So, Dish Wireless is proposing 9 antennas total on the rooftop, broken up into 3 different sectors in different locations on the building. The alpha sector, as I alluded to, on the north side of the building, the beta sector, relatively on the south side, and then the gamma sector towards the rear, mounted to the bulkhead of the building. So it is 3 antennas in each of the 3 sectors.
And what about the associated radio battery equipment cabinets?
Yeah, so each sector has associated remote radios and equipment that are mounted directly behind the antennas, providing the necessary support for the antennas, as well as going back to the equipment cabinet, power panel, and telco box that we have proposed mounted onto the side of the bulkhead.
And you heard Pavan mentioned earlier, what size are these antennas? How tall are they?
They're 6 feet tall.
And they're 19 inches wide, correct?
That is correct.
And you heard us talk about the tall building with multiple carriers that we're all very familiar with at 630 Valley Road, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And in a perfect world, would that be an ideal location for these antennas?
Yes, that is, as has been noted a few times, that is a slightly taller building, has areas on the sides as well as the penthouse of that building that antennas could potentially be mounted on, as is the current situation. But as we have looked at the building with the current installations of the current carriers on that building, we've deemed that it is not a viable candidate for Dish Wireless to add their equipment cabinet and antenna sectors onto that building.
So to be clear, in your professional opinion as a professional engineer and a structural engineer, Dish would not be able to install these 9 antennas in 3 separate sectors at 630 Valley Road. Is that fair to say?
That is correct. And Would I be able to enter these as an exhibit? As photos of the 630? Or,
Sure. This will be A2, or just A2, right, Jim? And for the record, this is photo of 630 Valley, this is on this side, right? 630 Valley, just a different one?
these are 3 different views of it.
Can they be all one, Chairman? There's 3 separate vantage points of the same building? Okay, so these are all going to be A2. For the record, A2 is, or aerial photos of 630 Valley Road.
I just have one. Yeah, if you could pass. Apologies. So yes, as brought just those to be able to depict, these are recent aerial photos of that rooftop that shows with the limited space on the flat section of the rooftop and also the areas where the antennas could potentially be installed and are installed on the exterior of that building, really does not leave any room whatsoever for Dish's antennas to be fit on there, as well certainly their cabinet and base station equipment. So it is my opinion that structurally that building would be a potential issue to add additional equipment to, as well as the physical limitations of the rooftop.
Okay, thank you. And back to the subject building here. We met at the Historic Preservation Commission last Thursday, correct?
Yes.
And one of the questions, recommendations that the Historic Preservation Commission had was to move the antennas back, particularly the alpha and beta sectors that front Valley Road. And if you do that, you heard Pavan's testimony in terms of the need to clear the parapet in terms of its propagations. Would you be able to do that from an engineering perspective and still clear the parapet, or would you need to raise the antennas? I guess that was 2 questions there.
Yeah, if the sectors were to be relocated on the rooftop, the antennas would need to be raised a subsequent amount. So the further that they're moved away from the parapet edge of the building, they would need to be raised an equal amount. So moving them back would not eliminate any visibility of the antennas.
So it's your professional opinion that this is the least intrusive means and the lowest height that we can mount, the Dish can mount these antennas to meet your RF experts' objective. Is that fair to say?
That is correct. We did certainly take that into account when designing the site, about knowing that it was within the historic district, but also the needs of Dish Wireless with the design of the site to make it as least intrusive as possible.
And one other thing, in terms of the historic preservation, as well as the requirement in the Montclair Township Ordinance for the NC zone, the conditional use requirements, Dish is also proposing to stealth these antennas, or screen these antennas, excuse me. Is that fair to say?
Yes, we've prepared actually 2 options of the photo simulations showing what the proposed installation would look like. One option being with a paint to match option to the same color of the exterior of the building, and another option with the Obscure Tech film applied to the antennas, which is a new technology that is becoming very popular because of its ability to really reflect the sky and the same look of the sky currently around it, to really mask the view of or mask the antennas, make it really blend into the sky surroundings.
So essentially, the reflective tape allows it blends into the current weather or sky conditions. Is that fair to say?
Yes, that is correct.
And in your analysis and reconnaissance of Montclair itself, did you notice any rooftop antennas above the parapet with such reflective screening or tape or wrap around them?
Yes, we have actually going in. I believe it is. What was it? On Bloomfield Avenue, correct? Sorry, I had to know. Of course.
I don't remember
There
exactly.
it is. There it is. 641 Bloomfield Avenue is rooftop, has 3 carriers installed on it currently, and one of the carriers actually has the film applied to it, and it can be seen, and as I've testified in front of other boards, it really does a wonderful job of masking the antennas, making them blend into the sky around them.
And you heard Pavan mention that obviously 641 is one of Dish's potential locations for one of their 4 sites in Montclair. And if Dish would, when we're designing that site, it's also designed to either have the same type of reflective tape or paint to match, whichever.
Yes.
You could do that there too, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yes, actually, looking at that rooftop, there's one carrier that is painted to match the exterior, one that does not have any camouflaging at all, and then the third sector, as I mentioned, that has the reflective film applied to it. So looking at that building gives a good idea of what each of the options could produce.
Okay. And one other recommendation that the Historic Preservation Commission mentioned was, should this antenna installation get approved, that they would want Dish to do a mock-up presentation ahead of installation. Would that be something that Dish could do?
Yes, if that is required, is a conditional requirement, would be able to, put up antennas with the film or painted to match the building exterior to see comparatively how they look.
And when Dish no longer needs their antennas at an installation, does Dish remove the antennas and equipment and all appurtenances and everything related to it if they're no longer needed or they become obsolete?
Yes, that's correct. I believe that's, to the best of my knowledge, that's part of their typical agreements with the owners, but also just standard practice that when a piece of equipment antenna is obsolete or no longer in use,
Right.
It is removed from the facility.
Correct. So not only is it a lease requirement, which I'm familiar with, but also Dish would be willing to accept any condition as set forth in the historic preservation letter that we would remove any antennas or equipment, right after they become obsolete or no longer necessary.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, I don't have any more direct questions for this witness.
Mr. McCulloch, do you have any questions?
I think I just have one question for you, Mr. McKeon, and that is, these antennas, you said they're 6 feet approximately?
6 foot tall and 19 inches wide.
Is there a particular reason why they have to be installed vertically? Could they not be installed horizontally?
Yes, that's based upon the technology, the propagation of the antenna equipment itself. So if the antenna was put horizontally, mounted horizontally, it would actually be they emit at a typically 45 to 65 degree angle on either side. So that would actually be sending the signal up into the sky as opposed to out in the directions that it is. So yeah, yes, it is part of the necessary installation that they are mounted vertically.
So that's really a characteristic of the design, right? There could be a time in the future in which Dish or some other company decides that they can make that technology work in a more horizontal fashion as opposed to a vertical fashion.
I'm not aware of any such antennas that I've come across. The panel antennas that are being proposed as a part of the Dish's approved equipment, and very similar installations for other carriers from my experience that those are the standard panel antennas in this configuration to be able to emit the radio frequency necessary.
And I guess just the other question I would have is that if approval is granted for the antennas to be installed on this building, I guess then, I mean, looking at the aerial view of 630, obviously it's very cluttered with a lot of technology sitting up there. Would this then not open the opportunity for more similar kinds of carriers to then migrate to that location, to put equipment up on that building, and therefore perhaps provide a view that would not be as complimentary to the public as one would hope?
So one of the positives, I guess, with the adjacent or 630 Valley Road is that all of the other carriers are on that building currently. So, and in such a proximity would be highly irregular for, one of the carriers to put another installation there. So, but, it is, we haven't looked at a design considering other carriers on the rooftop. We were just looking at, obviously, design specifically for Dish Wireless.
Mr. Caulfield?
Maybe the counselor can answer this, but if we put a dish onto this, then for future references, other companies could put a dish on this building? Is that what
You're saying antennas?
Yeah, antennas.
If they meet certain criteria, they would be able to, they'd still be subject to local, your Montclair Township zoning and construction approval.
Okay.
And they'd have to meet certain requirements in terms of height, in terms of number of cabinetry.
So there's still some things they have to.
There
brush
are,
over. Okay.
right. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, they still have to go to the Historic Preservation Commission as well.
No, that's not correct, actually.
That's not correct.
Yeah, sometimes there's a Section 106 review. It's just
Right,
advisory, though.
okay.
It's not always done, though.
Okay, understood.
Mr. McKinnon, the access to the roof, did you get on to the roof in this building?
I did not
Okay.
personally, but my
It doesn't look like it's like maybe a hatch roof aspect of it. It's not like a giant, like a door opening up there. I mean, from the pictures there.
Yes, I believe, right,
Yeah.
the access is correct. I believe it is a hatch onto the roof.
A hatch there. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Ms. Harris?
You mentioned that the antennas are 19 inches wide. Is that the series, or is that each individual antenna?
Each individual antenna.
Okay, so like the series would be 57 inches wide, thereabouts.
Roughly,
Okay.
yes, but they are slightly separated from each other. They can't be directly next to each other
Okay.
for potential interference between them. But so there is some separation in between each.
And then do you have to install them, a series or 3 series of 3 for it to function correctly? Or is it just because you're trying to achieve a certain coverage that you have 3 sets of these antennas on this roof?
Yeah, that's all based upon the radio frequency design for the site and the different frequencies that are being, the coverage levels of the frequencies of each antenna, each radio. So that is all part of the radio frequency design necessary to meet the coverage that, as Pavan was testifying to.
And then what is in between? What's running in between each?
That is just cable tray. So just run directly on the rooftop. Usually they're on non-penetrating sleepers. Sits about 10 inches above the rooftop, and that's just from the base cabinet to run the cables to each of the sectors safely and securely.
Okay, and then all of the power you said is in the basement. Do you run that through the building, or do you run it on the exterior of the building?
That is run from, sorry, I'm just switching over to sheet Z4 to just show there are two conduit run up the back of the building from the basement to the rooftop, providing power and grounding.
Okay, and then you mentioned something about possibly installing obscure tech on the antennas. Is there any concern about birds flying into it and potentially hurting themselves, or?
None that I've heard of or am aware of, because the antennas are still, it's all based upon the angle, actually, so it's based upon someone standing at ground level, looking up at an angle, and based upon that angle, it's reflecting the sky, at a similar angle coming downward. So, if you're at a higher level, you would have a different perspective of, what's being reflected. But, good question. But yeah, I have not heard of any issues or concerns with birds.
Excuse me, Chairman Harris, I have a brochure. I think that could be helpful if you've never seen the obscure tech before.
Yeah.
I can pass that around. Chairman's will be, we're up to A3.
Yes.
And I do have multiple copies of this one. 5, 6. That would be 6. Gives you some real life installations, some pictures of those. And that gives you an idea of how it looks from street view.
Didn't have quite.
So
I thought there were a few more, sorry.
Oh, wait, I have one more.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
I have no further questions.
Mr. Church?
Yeah. The chairman mentioned the fact that there's other buildings in the area that are taller. And within the 1.8 radius that you need to make this effective, has the engineer looked at those buildings that were taller? Have they been in the mix before you settled on this building? Because it's a little, if you look at the photos, and I was here way back when they started putting antennas on top of the other building, and it really ganged up and it started to look like a porcupine up there. There was just too many antennas and everything else. I'm a little concerned about you're choosing this area without having eliminated areas around it that have similar height or higher buildings that you could have used. Have you investigated other buildings within that 1.8 radius before you selected this as your site?
Mr. Church, I can answer that question. There was one, the chairman mentioned 530 Valley Road, and I know we talked about a lot of these buildings throughout this whole process internally, and they brought it to my attention, refreshed my recollection that landlord at 530, while it may have worked from our perspective, the landlord rejected the request of DISH to install antennas on the rooftop.
Okay.
So if you have an unwilling landlord, obviously if you have the perfect structure, but the landlord unwilling to accommodate, it becomes unusable.
So this has become, for lack of a better word, your default area. You come back to Valley Road because there's no other place to go.
Well, essentially, they need, as Pavan Madahar
Right.
indicated, they need to cover Valley Road. They're primarily a major objective of the RF in terms of its propagations for just DISH's 5G coverage is right along Valley Road, in building, like he said, vehicular and street pedestrian traffic. And there aren't many buildings, that are available, so you have to have, obviously you have to have a willing landlord. You have, which ruled 530 out, you have to have an area to place the antennas, which ruled 630 out. And here we had a willing landlord, a tall enough structure, and the ability to design it, and reduce the visibility as much as possible, and still achieve the coverage objective. Obviously, we look for zones that are, where antennas are permitted as conditional uses, and try to meet every condition. And some, due to the nature of the structure that you're mounting the antennas on, can't always meet, all of the conditions.
Does DISH anticipate any additional antennas for this site if it's approved?
I don't
Other than
believe
what
so.
you've got
I
now.
have, in fact, the 9 antennas are
Okay,
what the antennas
Mr.
are. I'm going
Long,
to bring.
Can we have witnesses testify?
Yeah, I'm going to bring
rather
him back.
than-
I was just going to say, I'm going to bring Mr. Madahar back to talk about what they're proposing now and why we're proposing 9 antennas, requesting approval for 9 antennas, and what DISH's plans are in terms of the latter part of phase 1. But yeah, I was going to bring him back up to answer that question, Mr. Church. Would you like to do that now, Chairman, or?
No, let's finish this
Finish it.
witness.
Okay.
Mr. Simon,
No questions.
Mr. Vieira.
Question about the antennas themselves. Are they mechanically fastened to the roof, or they're resting on their own weight?
They, so the antennas themselves, the 3 antennas per sector, are mechanically fastened to a frame, a non-penetrating ballast mount. So that is a steel structure that is sitting on the rooftop and has, without penetrating, attaching to the structure, but has typically CMU blocks on it to add weight to it, and that was part of our structural analysis, one to make, calculate and make sure that enough ballast weight is added to the structure to meet all the structural requirements, and also assure that the rooftop structure can support it.
Yeah. And in your calculations, that included wind uplift requirements, so basically just, the antenna is not going to fly away from the roof.
Yes, that's correct. You're right. That's taking into account all loading scenario, wind loading, and others that would potentially overturn or slide it.
Okay. In terms of snow, how will that affect the antennas? If they're covered by snow, someone has to go up and shovel? Or?
No, well, I mean, snow itself does not affect the operation of the antennas themselves. And snow loading on the rooftop is also considered as a part of our calculations.
And last question about maintenance. Because of the antenna's location near the edge of the building, do they require safety rails, guardrails around the antennas?
No safety rails are proposed as a part of the installation, and it is, a requirement of anyone accessing, obviously, the rooftop, maintaining the antennas and the installation, that they meet all OSHA requirements.
Okay. Thank you.
I just have a couple of questions. The gamma sector antennas, how are they mounted? Your drawing shows 2 of them are shown one way and the third shown, but the simulations, they all look the same. I'm trying to understand the difference. I'm ultimately going to the height of those, but first I want to understand how they're mounted.
Yeah, and thank you for the clarification. I was answering
I understood you were dealing with the alpha and beta
the alpha
sector.
and beta, right. The gamma sector itself are physically connected to the bulkhead structure. So they are mounted onto the side wall of the structure.
Okay, and why aren't those antennas mounted on the bulkhead itself, or at least partially down, rather than being, they're significantly higher than the others? Trying to understand why, is that a coverage requirement? Or could those be lowered and still obtain the desired coverage?
So the gamma sector was proposed to be installed higher than the bulkhead that they're being mounted on because of the rooftop area. Excuse me, apologize. Higher than the bulkhead structure that they're mounted to because of the rooftop area that would be in front of them and below them. So we wanted to make sure that that area of the rooftop was still accessible to be able to walk in front of the antennas. If they were mounted any lower, the EME would require, and obviously that wasn't part of our design, my firm's design, but part of the discussion was if they were any lower, that would prohibit anyone from accessing that part of the rooftop.
How far is the bulkhead from the edge of the roof? I mean, the alpha and beta sector antennas look much closer to the edge of the roof than the gamma sector antennas.
Yes, they're set back a ways, and that was also part of the radio frequency design, with them being set back a bit from the roof edge. They needed to be higher to make sure that they are not shadowed or blocked by the edge of the building.
Why isn't that an issue for the other two antennas, for the alpha and beta antennas? I'm not understanding.
Because they are right on the, very close to the edge of the building. You don't have the building itself blocking the frequency. With those setting back further, it would cause some potential blockage, shadowing is the correct term for it, of the radio frequency, with them sitting back further from the edge of the building.
How high is the bulkhead?
I have elevation sheet Z7. So the top of the bulkhead, actually called out here as a penthouse, is 43 feet 4 inches. And then the antennas, top of antenna is proposed at 51 feet 4 inches.
But how high is the bulkhead above the roof of the building?
The building top of roof is 36 feet. So,
It's
7 feet 4 inches.
And I guess I understand why you couldn't put them, well, let me ask this. Did you consider putting them a similar distance to the edge of, not mounting them on the bulkhead and putting them a similar distance from the edge of the building as the alpha and beta sector antennas?
That was the part of the radio frequency design, which I'll refer back to the RF engineer on that portion. But yes, with the parapet wall on the back of the building being slightly higher than it is in the front of the building, because it does step up as you go towards the back of the building, and with the bulkhead being there towards the back of the building, that was the preferred design, was to mount to the bulkhead itself.
Okay, and I guess, even given what you're saying, why couldn't it be, have the antenna, and there are a number on 630 Valley Road, and they're also on 641 Bloomfield Avenue and 36 Hawthorne, where they're partially above the bulkhead, but partially below, not be sufficiently high to not have the shadow effect, but not sticking up as high as they are by having them totally above the bulkhead.
So that gets back to the EME portion of it, of wanting the bottom of the antenna to be high enough as well that it is not causing, higher EME, levels on the rooftop itself.
So maybe, Chairman, are you asking if we can maybe the gamma sector install it in a similar fashion to the alpha and beta sector? Is it closer to the edge of the parapet?
Or to lower them somewhat, still keep them on the bulkhead, but lower them somewhat.
Would you be able to do that?
We, as long as that meets RF requirements, that could be a consideration, yes.
I have no further questions. I should ask, and are you going to bring the RF person back? I don't know, how do you want to proceed?
Yeah, I think I'd like to bring the, Mr. Madahar
Okay,
back.
and then I'll open it up if there are any members of the public who have questions
Okay.
for either of these witnesses.
Okay. First, I wanted to answer the question that arose regarding why do we have 9 antennas? Can you explain what DISH proposes to install in terms of phase 1 and the latter part of, I guess you could say
So
phase 2?
phase 1, we are gonna use 1 antenna per sector. And the other 2 antennas are for our future technologies.
So it's fair to say right now, you're going to install 1 per sector as a bare minimum to try to meet that 70% requirement?
That's right.
And as you continue to build the network and obviously, hopefully gain more customers, you're going to need the additional coverage. It's similar to other installations that have 6, 9, or even 12 antennas.
Right.
Is that fair to say?
For the future technologies and for the optimization. As the more customers are gonna come, we may add 2 more antennas in future.
Is it your experience, based on your 25-plus years of doing this, that carriers in the early stages zone for, say, more antennas than they're going to initially build, like right away, and then intend to futurely use those same in the future, utilize those sectors to continue to build a robust network?
That's right.
Any follow-up questions for him regarding why we have 9?
In terms of future growth, what is the estimated time frame for the viability of just these 9 before you think an expansion would be required? Like, what is the planned expectations for these 9 to be in service before boosting the signal or requiring?
So maybe in couple of years, maybe 2 years or 3 years, we will add new technologies. As the more customers come in, we have to put more radios to cater to the additional customers.
So within 5 years, there's a potential that you might have to add additional antennas at this location?
That may be right.
Are you saying beyond 9?
No,
I think,
no,
let's
only
make sure.
9, yeah.
Yeah, so what, is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
yeah.
Like total of 9, so let me ask you, I want to make sure, because you're thinking
Basically,
like
how
maybe
long
more.
will these 9 be adequate to support? What is the planned
Okay.
timeframe for these 9 to be able to support the expected customers before you would have to add an additional antenna to this location?
So maybe a couple of years, maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years.
But I think, to make sure you're answering his question correctly, does DISH plan to install more than 9 antennas at this site at any time in your professional opinion? In the
At
near
this
future?
moment, maximum are 9 antennas.
So in 2 years, that's when DISH will probably need all 9, is that fair to
Yes,
say?
that's right.
Not beyond, not more than 9, not 12 or not 15?
Only 9.
But what is that based off of? I mean, number of clients, customers, households? What is that based off of?
So they may add more spectrum, like CBRS spectrum. So they will add one more antenna for CBRS. Then they may add like maybe for millimeter wave antenna. So these are in the pipeline, which may come like in 2 to 3 years.
And will those new technologies replace any of these 9, or they'll just be an addition?
That will be additional.
Okay.
When you say additional, you mean total 9 antennas at this site, right?
Yes.
Additional to the 1 antenna per sector first, and then
And 2 additional later.
at the same locations, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So initially, you're going to install one antenna, and then in perhaps 2 years, you're going to install the other 2 antennas per sector?
That's right.
Okay.
Excuse me, so we're not going to see 12 antennas up there, or 15 antennas up there, or 19 antennas up there?
No, or maximum 9 antennas.
And that number anticipates your projected growth of the use of dish.
That's right.
But that growth could skyrocket. And then you'd have to put more antennas up there.
So at presently, the future plan which we have is maybe next 2 to 3 years, we will have 2 more antennas using
Okay.
CBRS. Yeah.
So the way I understand it is you're going to put up 1 antenna per station
As of today.
initially.
Yeah, initially.
And then in 2 years,
Means I'm not specific 2 years. Could
well,
be
okay,
maybe-
3
yeah,
years
yeah,
or in the future,
Yeah.
you're going to add antennas to that
Right,
up to the amount of 3 per station.
yes.
And that
per
should be
sector.
enough, and that's enough.
Yeah, that's enough. That's all.
You won't have to go another section. You got 3 sections now, you won't have 4 sections.
So as currently, this is the plan for next like couple of years.
Okay.
So maximum will be 3 antennas per sector.
Okay, so you have no idea what would happen 6 years from now?
Yes.
May I? Mr. Jones, is your client going to stipulate that the maximum total number of antennas on this roof shall be 9 and no more? Is that the stipulation that I'm hearing?
That's correct.
Are there any members of the audience who have questions either for this witness or the civil engineer? Okay, Mr. Jones, you want to call your next witness?
Yes, I have one more
Thank you.
witness who is a licensed professional planner. He's been before this board many times, Mr. David Karlebach.
Sir, I'm over here. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Would you please state your full name and business affiliation for the record?
Yes, my name is David Karlebach. I'm the president of David Karlebach PPPC.
May I ask you to spell your last name so it's
Certainly.
correct?
Capital Karlebach.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Karlebach, briefly provide the board with the benefit of your professional qualifications.
I have a master's degree in city and regional planning from Rutgers University. I'm a licensed professional planner, and I have been for 29 years. I currently hold the position of Joint Planning Board Planner in Rivervale, New Jersey. I've previously qualified and testified before hundreds of boards, including this board.
They accept him.
Thank you, Chairman. In addition to listening to the testimony earlier of DISH's RF expert and professional engineer, what did you do in preparation for this meeting tonight?
Well, I reviewed all of the application materials, including the site plan drawings and the photo simulations. I have visited the site and the surrounding areas. I've reviewed the municipal zoning ordinance and master plan, other relevant planning documents.
Okay, can you describe this site from a planning perspective, in your professional opinion?
Certainly. Actually, I think the board's planner did a wonderful job describing the site and the surrounding area, so I'm just going to repeat many of his same comments in his review memo. So the site contains a 3-story mixed-use building with retail tenants and a restaurant on the bottom floor. And then it also has offices on the second floor, and I believe residential apartments were approved back in 2009. So the third floor contains 5 apartments. The lot itself is an interior lot. It's trapezoidal in shape, and it contains 8,100 square feet. And it's within this, Valley Road business corridor, so it's a pretty active area. In terms of the surrounding land uses, as the planner states, they include commercial and mixed-use businesses along Valley Road to the north, south, and east of the site. There is a municipal parking lot to the rear of this building or to the west, and there is a telecommunications facility for various wireless carriers at 630 Valley Road, which is only 2 lots away. That's at the corner of Valley and Lorraine Avenue. And, there really are no buildings of significant height in the immediate area. They're mostly 1, 2, and 3-story buildings. I know the chairman mentioned 530 Valley Road. That's approximately 0.3 miles to the south. And again, that building was not available to this applicant because of the landlord had no interest in leasing the property. So just as an aside, there are many components into choosing a site. Of course, having a building or a structure of significant height is one of the parameters, but there are several others. Of course, you have to have a willing landlord. And then, of course, it has to be constructible. For instance, if you had something like a wooden roof or a sloped roof, that could impact the ability of the carrier to place antennas on the rooftop. And finally, there's zoning ramifications. For instance, you may have a 6-story building within 0.3 miles of the site, but that building, could be a residential structure within a residential zone and require a whole different set of approvals. It may be a use variance versus, a conditional use approval, something in that nature. So there's a lot of factors that go into evaluating the appropriateness of a site and then whether or not that site is actually viable. I hope I stated that correctly. The proposed use was talked about in great length. I think the engineer did a wonderful job of describing that. And I just wanted to reiterate that only one equipment cabinet is proposed at the rear of the building, attached to the penthouse structure. That equipment cabinet is roughly the size of a refrigerator, and the board planner notes in his memo to the board that it's not visible from the public realm. Even if it were visible at some point, from say, for instance, a floor from an upper floor of one of the surrounding buildings, it's visually inconsequential. Again, it just looks like a refrigerator. And the applicant has presented 2 options for camouflaging the antennas. They could be painted to match the building, they could be painted to match the sky backdrop, or they could be treated with this dynamic reflective film. And I say dynamic because it's always changing according to its environment, depending on the atmosphere, whether it's a cloudy day or a sunny day. In terms of the zoning for the property, we heard that this property is within the NC Neighborhood Commercial Zone, and the installation of telecommunications facilities is permitted as a conditional use in the NC Zone District. The applicant is seeking a D3 conditional use variance for failure to meet one of the conditions. And that condition is that the height of the antennas shall not exceed the top of the parapet wall, penthouse, or chimney to which it's attached, and it doesn't comply because the antennas will extend above the height of the roof. Now, I know that the board understands the difference between a D1 variance and a D3 variance, and I don't want to take up a lot of your time, but more for the benefit of the public, I just want to lay out that distinction. So in the New Jersey Supreme Court in Coventry Square versus the Westwood Zoning Board of Adjustment declared that a variance for a conditional use is more like that for a permitted use, and therefore the standards for determining whether or not a grant for a conditional use variance, I should say the standards are different for a conditional use applicant than those seeking a D1 or a D2 variance. So they're less burdensome, okay? The Supreme Court enunciated a modified version of the traditional negative and positive criteria, and they tailored it specifically for the conditional use context. And the court opined that conditional uses, even then when they do not comport with all of the requisite conditions, they are nonetheless essentially compatible uses in the zone. So as board members, you know, as planners, we don't have to wrestle with the idea of whether or not this use should be permitted at this location. The governing body has already determined that it is appropriate at this location, subject to conditions. So we already have that built-in compatibility. A conditional use variance applicant must show that the site will accommodate the problems associated with the use, even though the proposal does not comply with the conditions of the ordinance to address those problems. So I'll address that first, whether or not the site remains appropriate for the proposed use. Well, first of all, we heard testimony from Dish Network's radio frequency engineer, and they have demonstrated the need for the facility at this general geographic location. Dish currently has no coverage in this area, so this is one of their initial sites in the network build-out, and it allows the carrier to achieve this network coverage utilizing an existing structure on which to mount its antennas, and that, of course, is a superior design to constructing a new tower in this neighborhood, which would have a much more significant impact. This site possesses all of the requisites for the successful deployment of a telecom facility. The facility requires a minimal site modification. It requires no increase in building area, no increase in impervious coverage. There's no site clearing or earth moving required. The entire installation is contained within the confines of the rooftop. And the facility uses existing access, parking, and electric service. It is ready fit for use as a telecom facility. Now, I stated the application fails to satisfy one condition, and that's regarding the mounting height of the antenna. This requirement is clearly aimed at minimizing the visibility of the antennas and the equipment. And I think the applicant has already addressed that by proposing innovative camouflaging techniques. So yes, it protrudes above the rooftop, but that's being mitigated by using this dynamic reflective concealment film. And although technically requiring a variance, it does fulfill the objective of the ordinance, which is to treat the antennas to match their environment. In terms of the negative criteria, let's first talk about the first prong of the negative criteria, and that is that there's no substantial detriment to the public good. And we heard prior testimony from the civil engineer that this telecommunications use does not generate any noise, vibration, odors, dust, fumes, glare, or any other objectionable influences. It's a completely benign use. Also, there's no increase in population or employment at the site. It's an unmanned facility, so we're not intensifying the activity that's occurring at the site. It's a very passive use. This use requires no increased demand on municipal services such as sewer service or water supply. It only requires telephone service and electric service similar to what you would have for a single-family home. And there's virtually no traffic impact associated with this use, only infrequent maintenance visits by a technician. Now, the courts have found that generally the negative criteria pertaining to telecom facilities implicates aesthetics. And that's, I think, what we're really focusing on tonight, if I'm correct, if I'm hearing the board. I believe that the application presents minimal visual impact issues as evidenced by the photo simulations which were presented to the board. Dish uses panel antennas and mounting configurations very similar to those of other wireless providers, including those antennas that are installed a short distance away at 630 Valley Road. And you heard testimony that the dish antennas cannot be flush mounted due to structural issues, but again, they can be treated with that dynamic reflective film, which better harmonizes them with the environment. I believe any perceived visual impact, or any other community impact for that matter, is not so substantial to alter the character of the neighborhood. The applicant agrees to prepare a mock-up of both the reflective film and painted antennas for the Historic Preservation Commission Design Review Committee to witness. The single deviation from the ordinance does not render the site unsuitable, and it does not impact the functionality of the site. In other words, none of the other tenants within this building are going to be impacted by the Dish Network facility. And I believe the proposed installation does represent the least intrusive method of providing service into this area. Now, the second prong of the negative criteria is that there's no substantial impairment of the zone plan. This application fails to satisfy the condition that the antennas not exceed the height of the parapet wall, penthouse, or chimney. And again, the purpose of this condition is to minimize the visibility of the antennas, and the applicant has addressed this in an alternative fashion. Also, this proposal, I believe, advances important purposes of the Montclair's wireless telecommunications ordinance by, and I'm quoting from the ordinance, encouraging the utilization of existing structures such as tall buildings to mount antennas and to install wireless telecommunications equipment, and encourage creative design measures to camouflage facilities. So, again, I think it's on point with what the ordinance is attempting to accomplish. And the board planner mentioned the most recent master plan, land use element of the master plan, which is 2023, very recent document. And that document represents this site, among others, for inclusion in a newly created C4 zone district. And without getting into too much about the C4 zone, because it really doesn't apply too much, it still recommends 3-story buildings within the zone. But one of the recommendations is to preserve the historic integrity of the district by ensuring that any new development maintains the character and scale of the key historic buildings that define the district. So I think the response to that is that these rooftop antennas are not so prominent to disrupt the character of the district. And the character of the district has been established for many years with the presence of the rooftop antennas of several wireless providers at 630 Valley Road. So I think that concludes my testimony. I think it's a very good application. I think the board should feel very comfortable in granting the D3 conditional use variance and site plan approval.
Mr. McCulloch, do you have any questions?
No questions, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Warfield?
No.
Chair.
Ms. Harris?
No questions.
Mr. Church?
No questions.
Mr. Simon?
No questions.
Mr. Vieira?
No questions.
I have a couple of questions. I guess the language you quoted from the recent master plan spoke to preserving the historic character, is that correct?
Yes.
And the ordinance dealing with wireless facilities includes, one of the goals is to protect the historic and residential areas from potential adverse impacts from the communications equipment. How do you reconcile your testimony and along with the determination of the Historic Preservation Commission that this is not compatible with the historic character of the Upper Montclair Historic District.
No, I understand the concern, and, obviously, the committee was wrestling with this very same issue when they reviewed the antennas at 630 Valley Road. And understanding that this is an FCC licensed carrier, they need to provide service to the residents in the area. It's an essential service, it's critical infrastructure, and how do we accomplish this? So I wouldn't say there's competing factions, I'm just saying that there has to be some, middle ground, some reconciliation. So what do we do? What can we do? Luckily, we're afforded the opportunity to have this newer technology, this concealment film, which I think really does minimize the any visual impact. And I looked at the antennas this afternoon, as a matter of fact, on top of the Leach Building. I thought it was very successful. And we're really, I think the applicant did go out of their way to come up with a good design for the building. I think the chairman had some very good ideas about possibly an alternative installation, I should say design configuration for the gamma sector. And we're very close, I think, to coming into an agreement on what looks best for this building and for this neighborhood. So, yes, I mean, no matter what you put on this rooftop, it's going to be visible, okay? Anything built above the ground is going to be visible. So the test cannot be, it's visible, therefore it has an impact. Because if that were the test, everything would fail, right? So what we're just trying to do is harmonize these antennas with their environment. What's the best solution? I think it's the concealment film. I heard the antennas on 630 Valley Road being described as cluttered. I heard somebody else say they look like a porcupine. I don't see that here, okay? I think this is a superior design to what's going on at 630 Valley Road. Even if rooftop space were available at 630 Valley Road, I think that building has enough antennas already. And moving it over 2 doors to this building, in my mind, represents a better alternative for this neighborhood and for this community.
I can't resist. So the applicant is proposing additional antennas at 641 Bloomfield Avenue. This board, not me, because no one knew what would happen in the courts, but voted to deny additional antennas on that building because of the feeling that it was cluttered. That denial was reversed, which, the same situation exists with 36 Hawthorne Place as to there are the same number of antennas there. Now, there's some differences in the building, but I don't know how you can argue when it's okay here because the one building's cluttered and, you're having this more antennas to two buildings that have the same number of antennas. But my real concern here is there's no question, and this board has approved a large number of antennas at those 3 locations, and it's a question of, and there's no question there's a need for a site in this area. It's where I am struggling, and I want your comment on, is the photo simulations show these antennas will be very visible. Some are from virtually everywhere other than if you're standing right in front of the building. And and as far as I've heard, the only thing the applicant has looked at is 630 where there wasn't room for it, and I'll accept that. And 530 where the owner was not willing to do anything, but there was no testimony as to exploring other buildings, at least some of which are of the same or greater height and do not have some of the issues with being able to, or at least visually from the street, located on the building facade. You know, I mean, this board has gotten better doing these antennas over time, and you can actually see the evolution of the antennas at 630 Road, where some of the initial ones just stuck up as these are proposed, but then we became more sophisticated, and many of the more recent antennas are only slightly above and blend in reasonably well with the building. And these, just are going to be very visible. And don't you think the applicant had an obligation within their search area to explore additional buildings before they chose this building, to see if those buildings were feasible to provide the necessary coverage?
Well, I think as a practical matter, there is an obligation. But then again, the use is conditionally permitted at this location. So
Well, it's permitted in the other buildings as well.
Right, in
It's
certain
not-
zones, right. I understand that. So if there were other buildings where it was also conditionally permitted use, yes, I think they would have that obligation to explore those other buildings. Now, I'm not involved this early in the process of going out and, seeking out these buildings that meet the radio frequency coverage objectives, okay? There's I guess a real estate team and an engineering team that goes out before I even see the application. But getting back to something you said earlier, I don't know that there's, a finite number of antennas per rooftop, or whether or not, a dozen or so antennas look the same on one building versus a different building. So I guess what I'm saying is, with this particular type of use, what we do is ad hoc decision-making, right? We don't just make a generality and say, 20 antennas is appropriate at one location, and at all locations. No, we look at each location individually, make an assessment whether or not there's a potential for too many antennas and therefore a greater impact. Now, again, at this facility or at this particular location, I don't see the substantial impact that the statutory criteria requires us to meet. In other words, when we look at the negative criteria, the test is not whether or not there's an impact. The test is it must be a substantial impact. So even if I were to agree with you and say, yes, there is a slight visual impact onto the area, it still fits within the criteria, the negative criteria established. It's not substantial. I don't see any substantial impact here.
Any other questions from members of the board? Any members of the public who have questions for this witness? Mr. Jones, do you have any further witnesses?
Perhaps. I do, during Mr. Karlebach's testimony, I do have a Dish Wireless site acquisition representative, but I'll explain to you what information was clarified for me. So you mentioned the...
If you want something for us to consider as evidence, it has to come from a witness.
Right. I'm explaining, we're going to bring them up to testify. We could have just 5 minutes to talk. Would that be acceptable for the board, 5 or 10 minutes?
Okay, we'll take our break now.
Is it good? Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll resume at 5 of 10.
Okay. Thank you. on there? Green light?
Jones, you want to call your next witness?
Yes. My next witness is Ms. Janay Burton. She's a senior site acquisition specialist for Dish Wireless.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Would you please state your full name and spell your last name and your business affiliation for the record?
Sure. My first name is Janay, Janay. Last name is Burton, Burton, and I am a senior site acquisition specialist with Dish Wireless.
Okay, Ms. Burton, but first, if you could provide the board with the benefit of your professional qualifications?
Sure.
and experience.
I have worked in the telecom industry for 10 years. I've worked with Verizon in building small cells and T-Mobile in building small cells, as well as modification projects and new site builds. And then I transferred over to Dish Wireless on the carrier side to work on this project.
Okay, and you've designed, it's fair to say that you've designed and been part of not only designing, but selecting sites from a site acquisition perspective for numerous, hundreds of sites across the Northeast.
That is correct.
And explain to me when the search ring for this particular area was issued.
The search ring for this site was issued initially in 2021 by our ARF engineer, Pavan, as he has already initially realized. We had a couple, my job as a senior site acquisition specialist is to oversee the selection of the site, which is the questions that are coming up at hand at the moment. With the selection of the site, we try to work with RF to provide the most optimum coverage for the search ring that has opened for 0.3 miles.
But before I go any further, does the board accept I should have said this before I had said that, as an expert in the field of site acquisition of wireless telecommunications?
What?
So she, well, in terms of her position as a senior site acquisition specialist for Verizon Wireless, who specializes.
Not sure that's an area of expertise.
We're not going to employ the Fry test here, I expect.
Okay.
I don't think it matters, but why don't you go on, and if for some reason you start asking hypothetical questions, and we'll revisit it.
No, I think we're fine. I'm sorry about that, Chair.
No worries.
Where did we leave off in terms of the search ring?
Oh, no, so the search ring was initially basically given to us for site acquisition. We vetted additional 5 sites total within the 0.3 search ring that Pavan has basically issued. Of those sites, 630 Valley Road, the site that has existing telecom, that's 2 sites away. 16 carriers, didn't get landlord interest, so the site was landlord rejected. Another site we issued was 600 Valley Road, which is 40 feet high, the landlord rejected. And that's site 530 Valley Road, the landlord rejected. And our last site that we vetted within this search ring was 2 Clare Ridge Drive, which is located in Vernon, New Jersey. It's 120 feet high, which will still cover the coverage that Pavan needed in order for us to have in this search ring, but the landlord rejected. So our only landlord interest within the search ring that Pavan had given to the site acquisition team was 622, 624 Valley Road, which is the application in front of you today.
So is it fair to say that DISH issues a search ring, your RF engineer Pavan issued a search ring, your goal was to search all existing structures? Obviously, after reviewing the ordinance, you realize that certain zones, perhaps here is the NC zone, where sites are conditionally permitted. You look for tall structures here. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
And of those tall structures, the only ones that you determine through you and your collaboration with your RF team were the sites that you just mentioned, correct?
Correct.
And of those sites, the only one that theoretically, well, they all theoretically could have worked had you had landlord interest. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
But the only one that had landlord interest and/or, in the case of 630, would work from an engineering perspective with landlord interest was the current site at 622, I'm sorry, -624 Valley Road, which is the subject site of this application.
Correct.
So is it fair to say that Dish always does an extensive alternate site analysis before selecting its primary candidate.
Correct.
And Dish utilizes sites with existing carriers when possible.
Yes.
Dish utilizes sites in zones where wireless telecom antenna installations are permitted.
Yes.
And when Dish ultimately comes up with an installation that doesn't meet all the requirements of the ordinance, is that essentially, I'm not going to say the last resort, but will Dish move forward, knowing the need for the site and the need to meet its objective, as we mentioned, the
FCC.
commitment to the FCC
Yes.
of 70% of the nation covered by June 14, 2023.
Yes.
And in your professional opinion, is this the least intrusive means? You've heard Mr. Karlebach's testimony, but really couldn't find anything along Valley Road, anything else that could satisfy our objective but for this subject site. Is that fair to say?
That's correct.
Nothing further direct for her.
Yeah, Ms. Burton, can you help us understand what is entailed in making an approach to a landlord? I mean, does Dish have a specific proposal for utilizing space? Or is it a negotiated process? I mean, is it just simply a matter of the landlord saying, I'm not interested?
Initially, when a site is selected, we reach out to the landlord initially by email, by phone, basically advise them the same thing that how Kevin made his introduction to what we need to do and cover, and to advise them this is what we require. Are you interested in a Dish proposal? Sometimes we discuss the rent amount, we discuss escalation, how much they will be awarded by allowing us to use their property, and we complete a design visit. If the landlord asks that they're interested, the next thing is the design visit, where the site acquisition team, the A&E team, the construction manager, they all go out to the site to design the site. If the landlord wants to move forward with lease exhibits and to move forward with the lease negotiations, a structure is completed, a lease is completed, and then we move forward. If a landlord basically tells us no, sometimes we don't necessarily take no for an answer the first time, and we continue. But in order for us to meet our objective by June 14, 2023, we had to basically move through each building within this ring in order to get the best coverage for RF.
And in terms of the options, the buildings that you referenced, were any of those in negotiation at some point, or were they just simply that the landlord said, I'm not interested in?
Two of them were not interested with telecom. The two Clare Ridge Drive site that was in Verona started off as an interest. They actually asked to schedule a design visit, and then they basically went silent, went dark. We never heard back from them, and then we received the official no, rejection, and through email.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Caulfield?
So the 0.3 miles is it a hard 0.3 miles between different towers? Is that your understanding?
Yes.
Your sites, okay.
Yes. So when the search ring is released initially, if you look at the 4 sites that are located within Montclair, at one point where 1642 at the top stops, then we need that 0.3 to cover where
Gotcha.
1712 is, and then the rest of the site at the south entrance. So within that 0.3, yes.
Okay. Obviously, that monopole, which is a giant pole, I know exactly where it is. That's your starting point. But so it puts us into this building because of the location of that pole, right?
Correct.
Okay. And one last question. Roads are important, right, for the movement of this data cells to come through. Like, people are on these roads, and those are like things that you look for as locations to put cell towers on.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Valley Road is of an interest because it is a high populated, dense area for population of Montclair.
Does cell travel better on like road areas that from locations to locations compared to like buildings could block it and stuff like that?
Yeah, that actually you can have that testified come from the
Yeah,
RF
but-
engineer, but yes,
Okay.
that's my understanding
Okay.
of radio frequency.
All right,
yes.
thank you.
Ms. Harris?
No questions.
Mr. Church?
No question.
Mr. Simon?
Hi. Did you just say that the monopole location is the primary site?
No, everything in Montclair is the primary site. But if you're looking at Montclair from top to bottom, like on the map, 1642, 1712, 2014, and 1736 sites are all our primary locations in order for us to achieve our coverage within Montclair.
Okay, so looking at the location of 1712, which is kind of dead middle, compared to the closest towers, if this location isn't approved or the landlord changes your mind, what's your alternative? Because this seems to be covering a pretty large area with no other poles, no other locations on the map in terms of coverage. So what's Plan B?
Plan B is to go back and revisit everyone that rejected us and try again.
But I guess going back to the same question I asked the RF engineer, this configuration works with those current locations as planned. What other configuration of all the poles have been considered to provide the necessary overlap?
I'm sorry, can you repeat?
So this plan works with the locations of all the poles, of all the antennas. Assuming, let's say that you don't get approval for 1712 anywhere in Upper Montclair, what other configuration of pole locations have been considered to provide the necessary coverage for this area?
Well, currently at the moment, while we're trying to get this approval, this again is our Plan A. If we're rejected, if we are rejected, if we go back to another site, RF will then have to replot Montclair to make it sufficient. So that could potentially be the fact of we need 530 and another site in order to fill this gap of 1712. Where 1712 right now fills this hole, you could potentially open up to having to need two sites where one site will benefit. But again, that can come from the RF engineer. He can basically testify to that. But if this site does provide us our coverage, so if we don't have this site and we have to go to a 530 or a 600 and they approve or they, reject again, we then now have a plot where we can't meet our FCC guidelines by June 14th.
I'm sorry, what was the June 14th date? What was that deadline?
June 14th, 2023.
What was that deadline set? Like, what's pushing that date?
Oh, the FCC. We have to have 70% of the population covered by June 14th, 2023.
But you haven't started yet.
Which is why we're here getting approval.
Well, let's clarify. They have started.
We
The
have
first
started,
objective
yeah.
was 2020, June 14, 2022.
Correct.
Okay.
And that was 20%.
20%, correct.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Thank you. No other questions.
Mr. Piera?
Yep. Hi. I guess the question that I have is, in your experience when you're vetting sites, is it typical to have 5 sites, or it's not typical? Because you've listed, I think, 5 sites that you vetted for this area. Is that typical?
Let me just make clear that it wasn't 5 sites all at one time. If we look at a site, if we look at an area, we vet the first site first. They say no, we go to the next sufficient building. They say no, we go to the next sufficient building. So they're not overlapping. We're all 5 sites and we just wait for the first one to say yes.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that we do get the best coverage. 62224 definitely gave us the approval, and it does provide the most coverage of Valley Road. Therefore, we went forward with that because that is the only landlord interest that we got in the ring.
Okay. So when the landlord for 622, 624 expressed interest, at that point you stopped looking for other sites.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Is it fair to say then you inquired of the other 4 sites you mentioned first sequentially, and only after you either got no response or a no that you ended up here?
Yes, 630 Valley Road was our very first site that we initially, because it is a site with existing telecommunications. Once we did not get landlord interest there, we moved on to the next site.
Okay. And the one building, I'm not sure, I think you said 600 Valley Road?
Correct.
Which building is that?
The 600 Valley Road, the 4-story building on 600 Valley?
Is the Chase Bank, is that,
Oh,
I think it's
sorry.
across the street from Chase
or,
Bank.
or the apartment building,
I think
the
the
mix-
the apartment building, the
What?
apartment building. The apartment building,
the mixed-use building that's retail on the first floor and apartments above?
600, yes.
Okay. And then, it's fair to say, those are the only buildings you pursued because you got the yes at the subject site, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I'm a little confused on the 0.3 miles. There's no way 2 Claridge Drive is within 0.3 miles of this site, even as the crow flies, which is how, how you measure it. So I'm intrigued by how you ended up there, and that would seemingly open up a range of other possibilities, not just the buildings that are in the Upper Montclair Center.
Because of the height. That building is 107
Yes, I
feet
understand.
tall.
It's
Yeah.
it's
So-
up high, and it is high.
Correct.
And but there are, even within the point, what is the center point of the 0.3 miles? I assume there's a radius you're looking at, and
Oh, the ARC engineer can, testify to where his radius, where he starts his 0.3.
okay, but obviously it's not a strict thing because the building in Verona,
I'm sorry?
it's not a strict 0.3 miles. That
It's not a, I'm sorry.
you're not confined to the 0.3 miles because the building in Verona is way beyond 0.3 miles from the other buildings you looked at.
Yes, so all of the buildings that are within the 0.3 had low AGLs, low height, 60/40. The site in Verona being 107 feet, if Pavan basically advised, this still gives me the coverage that I need in order to hit. If the landlord's not interested, we moved away from that site. Even though, yes, the 0.3 is not as strict. If we have a site that is sometimes without that boundary and a landlord is interested, we will essentially do what we need in order to provide that coverage.
And it's the same landlord for both of the apartment buildings there? There are two
I'm sorry. say
There are
one
two
more time.
apartment buildings.
Right.
And it's the same landlord?
For, I'm sorry, which property are you?
The site in Verona?
Oh, 2 Claridge.
Yes, there's a,
I can go back and look at my notes on who the property owners and what conversations we had with them, but I'm pretty sure, yes, it's the same owner.
okay. The other thing which so at other locations, carriers have used a monopole that was also served as a flagpole. And there's this big flagpole behind 630 Valley Road. I understand that flagpole can serve, but is that something that was looked at?
I'm sorry, the flagpole behind,
630 Valley Road.
no.
Okay, but not in terms of using that flagpole, but doing a monopole there, which I know other carriers have done at other sites, not in Montclair, but,
No, that wasn't researched.
okay. Any other questions from members of the board?
Can you just tell us how many landlords declined the dish offer based on the remuneration that was being offered to them?
I believe 2?
So they didn't like the deal, the financial deal?
Correct.
That was the reason for declining?
Correct.
One other question. You indicated Valley Road as a major road. How would you characterize Grove Street in terms of it being a major road?
I'm sorry, which street?
Grove Street.
Growth? Grove, as a major,
As what I would observe, having roughly equivalent traffic as Valley Road.
yeah, again, that is from, the RF can basically testify and witness what they believe traffic-wise would necessary. For us, when the search ring was released, it was, the main point was Valley Road. So I would.
But they did, was there a study of cars per hour, cars over some period of time for?
That I can't testify
We
to.
can maybe bring Pavan back to
Pavan back
ask
to
that question in terms of how he determined the ring and why the center of the ring was where it was, in terms of what data and that he used to determine that.
That's up to you. Okay, let's finish here. Any other questions for this witness? Any members of the public have questions for this witness? It's up to you if you want to bring.
Yeah, I don't want to leave that question unanswered, so I'll bring Mr. Madahar back for a sec. You can sit down. You can, I don't think we need you back. You can sit down if you want, or you can stand up. Just going back to your search ring, so what goes into your evaluation when you issue a search ring, and when you help your site acquisition specialist, Janay, pick viable candidates for your
So
sites?
we look the how many POPs are being covered, and if any highways are there, are those being covered, highways or major roads? So that's our main objective.
Can you explain what a POP is to the board?
POP is populations, like some apartment building or residential buildings are being covered. So that's our main objective. And other main objective is to cover, to provide the coverage on highways, major roads, and lastly on the local roads. So we don't have any vehicular traffic number which you are looking. So these are the main objectives, to provide the coverage on the highways, major roads, local roads, and to provide the coverage on the POPs, where the residential area or commercial area or apartments are there.
So essentially, is it fair to say you base your analysis and your selection of your ring and your intended coverage objective based on population, based on the number of people who live, work, or play in that particular area? Is that
Yes,
fair to say?
and also the highways.
So you did not do a study of specific roads and traffic. I mean, I assume when you're doing Valley Road, you're focusing on the Upper Montclair business
No, we
district.
didn't use the traffic count on those roads.
Any other questions from members of the board? Mr. Jones, do you have anything further?
No further witnesses?
Okay, are there any members of the public who have any comments, testimony, anything whatsoever you want to say about the application? Okay, Mr. Jones, you want to sum up?
Yes, thank you. So as I mentioned in the beginning, Dish is an FCC licensed wireless carrier who made a commitment to the FCC. They're on their way to become the fourth wireless carrier behind Verizon.
The mic.
Green light on. The green light.
I'm sorry?
On the other one, on
On
the
the tape.
one, the other one. Is the green light on?
Yeah, I believe so.
The one next to you.
Oh, yeah, I apologize. I think I turned it off during the break. All right, let me, where was I? So Dish committed to the FCC a year ago to cover 30% of the country, strike that 20% of the country by June 14th, 2022. They achieved that objective. The next commitment, which is still part of phase one of their development, was to cover 70% of the country by June 14th of this year. And that requires a great number of sites. Dish is, as I said, building out the first of its kind total cloud-based 5G network. And to do that, they had to aggressively find viable candidates. You heard testimony from RF, Mr. Pavan Madahar, in terms of how he determines search rings. They figure out where they need sites, where they want coverage. They base it on population. They base it on major roads. They want to provide reliable in-building coverage, vehicular coverage, and also pedestrian coverage. They have 4 proposed sites in the township of Montclair at the locations that we mentioned. The search ring itself contained multiple tall candidates, and when there's a search ring, the site acquisition professional team, led by Janay Burton, who testified earlier, looks for all viable candidates, looks for interested landlords. They look for tall structures with existing carriers. They look for monopoles, obviously, first. They also have a zoning team internally who looks at local ordinances. They search sites that have either conditional use approvals or permitted use provisions in their land use codes that allow these sites. Here in the NC zone, as we mentioned, wireless telecom antennas are permitted as conditional uses. The applicant will first try to design a site, obviously, to meet all of the conditions. Here, DISH was unable to meet the one condition due to the unique nature of the building, and that condition being installing the antennas at not above the existing parapet wall. You heard testimony from the civil and structural engineer, Mr. McKeon, in terms of why that's not possible, in terms of meeting that condition. You also heard testimony in terms of how the antennas will be screened. We will meet the conditions and the requests of the Historic Preservation Commission regarding a mock-up, regarding either stealthing the antennas with reflective film or painting them to match the building facade. There will also be a mock-up presentation should this site get approved prior to construction. And during that mock-up presentation, DISH Wireless representatives will essentially be on the rooftop and have the Historic Preservation Commission, as well as members from this board, should they so choose the appropriate screening method, whether it be the paint to match or the reflective facade, reflective wrap, that is. You heard testimony also from radio frequency engineer Pavan Madahar that the site will fill, obviously the gap in coverage is huge because all of Montclair is a gap potentially. The FCC licensed carrier has an objective pursuant to its FCC license requirements to provide coverage and to fulfill the requirements of that FCC license. Obviously, DISH has a large portion of the country, particularly New Jersey, as an open area, essentially a gap in coverage. So this site, based on the testimony that you heard, the applicant submits that it will fill that gap in coverage in conjunction with the other proposed sites in Montclair. No site is perfect. You have to have a site within the scheduled search ring. You have to have an interested landlord, and you have to have a site that works from an engineering perspective, both radio frequency in terms of how the antennas propagate, and structurally in terms of how and where the antennas can be mounted safely and still achieving the goals of the RF team. You heard testimony from the applicant's professional planner, David Karlebach, who explained he went through the beneficial criteria and the benefits outweighing any detriments. He opined that the Coventry Square standards highlight the fact that the use obviously is permitted and that the board here should focus not on the use itself, which clearly Montclair Township has determined is appropriate for this particular site and this a rooftop in this particular zone, but more so on the magnitude of the deviation, which the applicant submits is de minimis in terms of the only impact being visual. And the applicant has attempted to reduce that visual impact by the screening methods that I mentioned earlier. So in closing, I think the applicant has designed a site to the best of its ability on an existing rooftop in the NC zone. And this is the least intrusive means for DISH Wireless to achieve its coverage objective here in Montclair Township. Thank you.
Start discussion, Mr. McCulloch.
I think I'm basically satisfied that there has been an attempt to identify a variety of possible locations for these antennas. That appropriate measures are being taken to try to conceal these antennas in a way that doesn't negatively impact the historical character of this area on Valley Road. So I think I'm generally in support of this application, but I'd like to hear from my colleagues.
Mr. Caulfield?
I agree with my colleague to my right, in the sense that they did vet the situation and the site here. But, you know, I feel like the poll over in Norman really decided to put this on Valley Road in this building. I'll sit and see where my other colleagues lie in that sense, and I'll wait to see for my decision. Thanks.
Ms. Harris?
I'm in favor of this application generally, as long as the applicant is willing to stipulate that no more than 9 antennas will ultimately be installed on the roof, and that the Gamma series of antennas will be installed at the same height as the other two, or at least as high as the penthouse that it's being attached to, and no higher than the penthouse.
Mr. Church?
I am not totally in favor of this application from the standpoint that a lot of talk has been about the visual impact that it's not making on the area. When you look at the pictures and some of the evidence that was before us, there is a visual component to this application. And my feeling is this visual impact in conjunction with 630 Valley Road, in my opinion, creates just a visual impact that Valley Road, Upper Montclair does not need anymore. So I would vote against this application based on that the visual impact adds to already, which was referred to many times, 630 Valley Road. And so I would vote against this application as presented. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Simon?
I'm also, not in favor of this application. I don't believe that all options have been considered for this location in terms of coverage for Montclair. I think there are other buildings, especially looking at the radius and the coverage area that's expected to be handled by this antenna. I think there are other options that should be considered before we grant a variance for this, especially if it's going to set a precedent for that particular building in that location. So I would not be in favor.
Mr. Vieira?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm also with my colleague, Mr. Moore.
Mr. Moore?
Mr. Simon. I'm referencing to the memo sent by the Historic Preservation Commission, dated April 17th, and they say that the antennas will have a negative impact on the historic character of this historic district. I think other locations have not been considered because at the time where you received a yes from one of the landlords, you stopped looking at other locations, and I think probably you could have either go back to the other locations and try to negotiate, but I just feel that this will have a negative impact, so for that reason I'm against. Thanks.
I'm also not in favor of the application. I think, to make clear, I am, I don't think I've voted against a single one, including the one the board denied, wireless application. I recognize the decision the federal government has made as to the importance of these facilities. I think, and I certainly agree that whether it's this board or the planning board will need to approve a location within their search area. I'm not a little intrigued by the search area, but that fills the gap in coverage in this area. But I think, as my colleagues have said, There has not been shown that the extent of the deviation here, this is, you know, the antennas are totally above the facade of the building, which for, other than some initial applications, we have been avoiding. I think there are buildings that have sufficient height within their search area where either are not in the historic district or can be done with less of a visual impact on this. I mean, this is a building that was recently expanded and done in a way so the Valley Road facade kept the historic appearance of the historic district. And just looking at, you know, the photo simulations, these antennas are going to be very visible. And while I certainly recognize the lesser standard that Coventry Square established for conditional use variances as distinguished from use variances, the wireless ordinance in town expresses concern for preserving historic character. The recent master plan again emphasizes preserving the historic character. The Historic Preservation Commission recommendation is that this is not consistent with the historic character. I think, you know, this is, yes, the use is conditionally permitted, but it is in the context of let's keep the historic character, and there's no way I can find that this proposal does that, that basically these antennas are going to be visible, and I just don't, the fact that this will be somewhat, I don't know what the right word is, made not totally visible by the reflective screening, or, you know, I think that's a better alternative if we got that point, because painting it the same color as the facade of the building when they have little, particularly the alpha and beta sectors have little relationship to the building facade, would make a difference. But I just, the whole point of the designation of the historic district was to maintain its character, and having antennas stick up, you know, 9 antennas sticking up visible from virtually everywhere in the district, it's just incompatible with that. And I think if they had come in and said there are no other alternatives, would be a different matter, but they found a willing landlord and they stopped searching. And you know, and even Mr. Planner's testimony was that yes, they should have searched more, and there are a number of buildings that are clearly within the search area that were not explored at all, and either could have been done without a variance, and then the lucky planning board could have dealt with them, or would have been a, you know, like some of the antennas we later approved at 630 Valley Road, as well as at 641 Bloomfield Avenue. I'm not sure about 36 Hawthorne Place, where, yes, they were slightly above the parapet, but most of the antenna was below, and you did not get the porcupine effect that you had with some of our initial approvals. Any further discussion among board members? If not, does someone want to make a motion?
Motion to deny the application.
Second.
Okay. Tommy, you want to call the roll?
Mr. Harrison?
No? I mean, yes for the motion. Yes to deny. Sorry about that.
Mr. McCullough?
Yes.
Mr. Caulfield?
Yes.
Mr. Church?
Yes.
Ms. Harris?
No.
Mr. Simon?
Yes.
Mr. Vieira.
Yes.
Motion to deny passes.
The next application is the continuation of the public hearing on 70 Grove Street, which we acted on everything except for one conditional use variance and the site plan approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Trembleak, you can proceed.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Alan Tremulac, appearing on behalf of the applicant, Amine Deroui. Again, this is a continuation of the application for site plan approval and variances for 70 Grove Street. The applicant is seeking to convert an existing two-family building to a three-family building, which is a conditionally permitted use in the R3 zoning district. As the chairman already indicated, we were here last month, and at which time the board voted to grant all of the variances we required, except for one D3 conditional use variance, which related to the requirement that all of the dwelling units in the converted building be accessed from a common entrance in the front of the building. The board did give us an opportunity to come back and present additional testimony and evidence in support of that variance. And we're prepared to do that this evening. Specifically, I have Mr. Guadagnoli, who will just provide some additional testimony supporting the opinion he gave at the last meeting that it was impractical, if not impossible, to provide for a common entrance to the basement, to utilize the existing entrance for access to the basement apartment. And then also have my client, who will just briefly review photos that he took recently of other buildings in the neighborhood, most of the other buildings on this side of the block, showing the existence of multiple doors in the rear and the sides of other similar three-family buildings. So, Mr. Guadagnoli, you're still under oath. You understand that, correct? Yes. All right. You testified at the last meeting that it was not practical to provide an entrance, utilize the existing front entrance to provide access to the basement apartment, correct?
Yes.
All right. And have you submitted or prepared a revised plan with notations indicating why, indicating support for that opinion that you gave?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Do we need to have that marked? We handed out the.
So let's identify what we're going to mark as A3.
That's a. Is there a revision date on the plans, John?
No, because nothing was revised. It's just a information. We didn't propose anything new.
If nothing's revised, what are we marking as an exhibit then?
Isn't there a revision date of April 17th?
I mean, I received today a copy.
No, that's right. I'm sorry. I'm tired. Sorry. Yes. Yes, that's right.
Okay, so I think we're up to
something
A3. Tommy, can you just confirm that?
I believe it's A4, but can we say A3 or A4?
We could, well, we'll just mark it A3.
Actually, give me one sec. I can check down here.
While we're doing that, okay, so what, this exhibit that we're going to mark, this is a plan that was prepared by you, correct?
Yes, that's right.
And it's got a sheet A1 designation on it, and
Yes.
it's bearing a revision date of April 17, 2023, correct?
That's correct, yes.
All right, well, why don't you continue, and then we'll get to,
All right, very good.
it is A3, okay.
Now, nothing's changed in terms of the plan itself, right? The only thing you've done, and correct me if I'm wrong, is added notes, indicating why it's not feasible to provide to utilize the front door as entrance to this apartment. Is that correct?
Yes, I essentially laid out where a stair could go, and the problems associated with that. If look at the existing first floor plan, which is the drawing on the right. There's a plan, by the way, of the basement apartment plan, and next to it is the floor just above it. Okay? The floor just above it, which is the first floor, you'll see I highlighted in yellow two notes. One is that the available stair width, the width of the stair that you could put there, which has to go underneath the stair that goes upstairs, the most you can get is 2'6" A stair to access an apartment or any dwelling has to be at least 36 inches. So it's physically not wide enough to fit under the existing stair that's there. If we tried to make it wider, it would narrow down the hallway to a situation where it's unusable. There's just simply not enough width in that hallway, that first floor hallway, to accommodate a stair down at the required width. Secondly, even the door to get into that proposed or potential stair with the top of the door would have to be like on an angle, because the amount of headroom there is problematic, let's put it that way. It's less than 6'6", and so at the low point. So that's one thing. Now let's say the stair went in anyway. Once you got into the basement, you have structural floor joists that run perpendicular to that proposed stair. So we'd have to cut out a whole section of the floor framing to make a hole for that stair. In addition, the main air conditioning trunk line is precisely under where that stair would go. So I can't move the stair anywhere else. If it's going to be in the hallway, it has to be under the existing stair. It's not wide enough. And the amount of, by the way, I still need the stair, the originally proposed stair, which is the one on the side facing the parking lot, the parking area, anyway, just because of the legal width. So I'd be building a stair that isn't wide enough, in addition to the enclosure of a stair that's already there and that works. So it just from a standpoint of not just practicality, but even usability, it doesn't work.
So I understand what you're saying about the width of the stair, if you were to put it utilize the front door, you'd only be able to get a stair of 30 inches wide?
Yes.
And that doesn't comply with building code requirements?
Well, right, I mean, you need like 36 for a means of egress.
Okay, so if you put it in at 30 inches, you'd still have to have the rear entrance door that we're proposing.
Correct.
In order to have an entrance that complies with the width requirements to meet the building code.
That's right, so building the stair or not building the stair, we still have the side entrance.
Okay.
To make this work.
Okay, okay. All right, that's all I have for Mr. Guadagnoli. Board has questions.
The photos.
The next witness is going to
Okay.
deal with those. Yep.
Any questions from members of the board?
Forgot.
Just quickly, how many means of egress do you need from?
I'm sorry?
How many means of egress do you need from a unit, a residential unit?
Well, because it's a it becomes a three-family, you do need two. One is the stair that exists, the other one would be the bedroom window. The means of egress out the back bedroom.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from members of the board? Any members of the public who have questions for this witness? call your next witness.
Okay, next witness would be my client, Amine Deroui.
Yeah.
Did I say it correctly?
All right, I don't think you testified the first time, correct?
I did, not the first time, but
You did or you didn't?
no,
Okay, so would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
I did.
State your name and address.
Mohammed Amine Deroui, 70 Grove Street.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. Amine, are you the owner of the property at 70 Grove Street?
Yes, I am.
And how long have you owned the property?
Since 2020.
Okay, and it's currently a two-family dwelling?
It is currently.
All right. Do you live in one of the existing units?
I certainly do.
Okay. All right, I'm going to show you a group of photographs, which I assume we're going to mark as A4. I believe there's 9 photographs. I think the exhibit might contain an extra page, which is a duplicate. But I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit A4, group of photographs. Did you take those photographs?
I certainly did, yes.
And when did you take those?
Monday, this past Monday.
Okay. And are those photographs of other houses in your neighborhood?
They're the immediate houses next to mine.
Okay, and do those photographs accurately depict the other houses on the day that you took them
That is
earlier
correct.
this week?
Yes.
Okay, and what was your purpose in taking the photographs? What were you trying to show?
I was trying to show that neighboring homes, that they are 3-family buildings, do actually have 1 or 2 other means of access the dwelling. So
Okay.
you can see that several of them, and some of them, they even have their mailboxes next to them. So it's very common in the area, and I have noticed that all throughout.
Do you want to just walk through the photos real quick? And the first one's marked 74 Grove Street. Is that the house directly adjacent to yours?
That is my neighbor, right next to
Okay,
me,
then
yes.
just-
74, yep. It's a
Indica-
3-family.
And just indicate on those photographs where you're showing the, I'm going to call them the other doors,
Mhm.
whether they're rear side doors or whatever, what's
Okay.
shown on the photos.
Okay. You can see the main entrance on the first picture on the left, and then there is a side door to access the other dwelling. 76 Grove, you can see the same thing. The main, there is one door facing Grove, and there is another door to the, on the back, facing the parking lot. 78 Grove Street, it does have, it's the same scenario, where you can see the main entrance facing Grove, and there is another entrance to another dwelling on the back, through the parking lot. 82 Grove Street does have 3 doors. There has one main entrance facing Grove, one on the left, and there is another one to the right. And these are side doors. 84 Grove Street, same thing, one facing main Grove Street and the other one on the back of the dwelling. 86 Grove Street does have 3 doors. As you can see, one access on the top, one in the main, and the other one on the back. 88 Grove Street does have 2. 81 Grove Street does have 2, one main facing Grove and the other one on the side. 10 Grove Terrace, one facing Grove Terrace and the other one on the back with mailbox, as you can see. 14 Grove Street, another scenario of the same example.
Okay. No further questions.
Any questions from members of the board? Mr. Simon?
And you know for sure that these doors are to dedicated units and not just side doors to the primary residence?
I cannot tell you they are for sure, but the one that I could potentially tell you for sure would be the last one, where you can see there are mailboxes on both sides of the doors.
What's your address?
It would be the last one.
14?
14 Grove Street, 10 Grove Terrace, where you can see that happening.
And the ones that you see 3 doors, my guess is as good as yours at this point, honestly, about that.
Okay, thank
Yeah, just further clarification. So you didn't necessarily speak to the homeowners to find out whether or not they were utilizing all of these doors as primary entrances for their...
That is correct. I did not speak to them. What I just wanted to show is these dwellings do have multiple doors that either yet they do lead to dwellings or not, but most likely, in my opinion, it's an opinion.
I mean, because you can go into almost any neighborhood in Montclair and you can find houses that have multiple doors. That's why I'm asking the question in terms of whether it's a primary entrance or it's not.
Do you have a question? No, I don't have a question.
You realize that in your neighborhood, you have apartment houses across the street, plus if these are all multiple three-family dwellings, you have all that, plus you have the potential for a development at the end of the street of Grove Street, which is going to put a huge impact of people into that area. But you're not sure that the rest of these residences are renting or utilizing different apartments. You don't know that that's true.
I do know these are multiple 3-family.
Yeah, you know, but there's no basement apartments additional or anything like that.
I don't know if they are basement or not.
All right, I just want to bring to for my edification at any rate, that there's big development possibly coming in to your neighborhood, and you'll be adding a lot of folks.
What they are adding, not me. They are adding 300. I'm adding.
Yeah,
more.
I know, but you've got apartment house. You're adding to the. You're putting more people in. Okay, I just thought I would put that out there.
I'm asking for 1-bedroom apartment, which technically would have maximum 2 people.
Are there any members of the public? Alan, I assume this is your last witness.
That's
Any
correct.
members of the public with either questions, testimony, statements, anything you want to say about this application? This is your chance. Okay. Alan, I don't think you need to sum up after we can remember 10 minutes worth of testimony, but if you really want to.
I really don't want to sum up just very briefly, the board heard a lot of discussion during your last application about the Coventry Square decision and the standards for considering a conditional use variance, and that's essentially that whether this property, notwithstanding its non-compliance with the one condition, is still an appropriate site for the conditional permitted use. And I think it's pretty obvious that it is. We're adding a basement apartment. The permitted density for this property would be 6 units. And we're well within that. We're proposing 3 units, which is half of what's permitted in terms of density. We have enough parking. We're expanding, we're adding the apartment without changing anything about the appearance of the building. We're not adding any additional square footage. It's going to continue to look exactly like it does today. No one would even know, candidly, that this apartment was added. We've demonstrated, I think, that it's impractical to provide for an entrance to the basement apartment utilizing the front door. And it makes sense to have the entrance in the rear. We've shown yes, we don't know for sure that these are dedicated entrances for these others, but the fact is there are entrances to the rear of buildings in the neighborhood, which is exactly what we're proposing. So I think, on the basis of the Coventry Square standards, that the proposed addition of a basement apartment is still appropriate for this location, and that the board should grant this additional variance, as well as grant site plan approval so that the application can proceed. So-
Mr. Chairman, can I just say something before we deliberate?
You may.
Yeah, I just want to remind the board that we granted a number of variances the last time, a number of D3 variances, C variances, an exception. What's before you right now is site plan approval and the one D3 variance relating to that entrance to the basement unit not facing the street. So that's what you're in front of. We did impose conditions last time, and let me just go through them also. The new basement level apartment shall conform to the housing code. No tree removal is approved, and any tree removal in the future shall be subject to the tree removal ordinance. Any trees removed between the unenclosed fire escape and the northerly property line shall be replaced with trees that will reach a similar height of the existing trees at maturity. The 4 outdoor parking spaces in the rear shall conform to the ordinance. The applicant shall comply with and satisfy comments 6, 11, 13, 14, 15, 18, 19, and 20 contained in the November 8, 2022 report issued by Marissa Tiberi of Boswell Engineering. And we have standard conditions. The applicant's bound by all representations made during the course of the public hearing, and that the applicant's responsible for inspection fees and escrow fees incurred in connection with review of the matter.
Start with Mr. Caulfield.
I think what was the sticking point here was the permitted lot size. You have 12,000 where the minimum was 15, and we felt that there was something wrong with the zone. I don't know if you remember that conversation, but I think that was a sticking point. Like R3, it really is looking for lot sizes of 75 by 200, and you're like 61 by 200. But I at this stage of the game, I think they must have messed up. I was thinking, because I walked there today, there's meters there. There's 3. Everyone has 3 meters, so there's definitely people that are more than one people are living there. So that being said, I'm not going to take that away from you in that way. But I just felt like maybe the town gave the zoning to a computer, and there's a post office there. It's a giant, there's also a funeral home, and the lot sizes are, maybe that configured in the 1,500 square feet aspect of that. So I'm going to go with that and say, like, everybody has it. Thank you for coming here and doing the right thing, and I approve.
Ms. Harris.
I think I'm satisfied that you consider the stair at the main entrance for the lower level apartment, and that it does present a hardship to place it there. So I'm okay with having the entrance at the back
Mr.
in this location.
I'm okay with this application with the stairway as proposed.
I'm in favor.
Mr. Vieira.
I'm also in favor.
Mr. McCulloch.
I'm also in favor.
I'm in favor. The applicant has both demonstrated that it's really infeasible to have all the units entrancing from the front entrance, and has also demonstrated that this would not have a substantial detriment to the neighborhood or to the zone plan, or substantial impairment to the zone plan based on multiple other comparable houses in the neighborhood also having more than one entrance to the building. So I'm in favor of granting this conditional use variance and granting site plan approval, subject to the conditions that we had previously imposed on the prior variances. Someone want to make a motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the next application is that of Paul Rotunda for property at 83 Park Street. This is an application to modify a condition of approval contained in the prior Board of Adjustment resolution dated August 21st, 2019, which granted site plan approval to construct an addition to the existing mixed-use building. Condition 9 provides no more than one dentist shall practice on the site. The applicant is requesting this condition be modified, provide that no more than 3 operators shall practice on site at any one time. Property is designated on the township tax maps as block 2312, lot 20, and is located in the OR3 garden apartment and office building zone. Are taxes paid, and is the notice in order?
Yes.
Okay, Mr.
Thanks. Good evening
Tremblant.
again, everyone. Alan Trembulac appearing on behalf of, have a seat, Paul, of Dr. Paul M. Rotunda. This is it involves property at 83 Park Street. In 2019, the board granted site plan approval to allow Dr. Rotunda to do an addition and some modifications, some renovations to this mixed-use building, which is at the corner of Park Street and Walnut Street. He's about ready to begin the construction of the project, I believe. And, you know, this is a somewhat unusual application where the only relief we're seeking is to modify one of the conditions in the board's resolution approving the application, which provided that no more than one dentist may be on site at any one time. And for reasons which Dr. Rotunda will explain, we're seeking to modify that condition. If we can have Dr. Rotunda sworn in.
Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board? State your name and address.
Paul Rotunda, R-O-T-U-N-D-A, 83 Park Street, Montclair.
All right, Mr. Scabilia, would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
I do.
All right, Dr. Rotunda, how long, you were the owner of the property at 83 Park Street?
I am.
And how long have you owned the property?
Since June of this on?
It doesn't sound like it's on.
This is the one that the button doesn't light up.
Test? Oh.
No.
June of 1993.
Okay. And you're a dentist, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. And how long have you operated your dental practice from this location?
Around the same time. It took about 6 to 8 weeks for modifications to open.
Okay. So about 30 years or so.
About 30
Okay.
years.
And you live in the residential portion of the building on the upper floors?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, you obtained the approval for the building renovations and modifications from 2019. What's the status of that project? Have you started construction, or?
Yeah, we've just started that. What delayed it was COVID. The approval was given right before COVID. And if I dare say that dentistry was probably the most dangerous profession during that time. So to go into an endeavor like that with the expense was something that had to be reconsidered. Since the dust has settled, we've decided to move forward with the project.
Okay. And would you just tell the board in your own words what it is you're seeking tonight with respect to the condition that I mentioned in the board's
I'd be happy to do that.
resolution?
Excuse me. On September 21st, 2021, I had a serious medical event.
Didn't see that coming. Okay, take a minute. Okay.
Alan, I think I mean, the issue is purely the impact in parking. I think we
Yeah.
just need testimony on.
Yeah, well, I'm just getting to that exactly,
and,
right.
You know, a couple of questions on what, one, there were 7 employees before, and I assume those were clerical, whatever. Just clarify whether that's changed or not, and the overlap with the proposed professionals, and I think this
Okay.
is fairly straightforward.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Let-
I'm sorry.
No, we're going to just go in a different direction for a minute, Paul, because the chair was just inquiring. Talk about the current personnel that you have in the office.
It's essentially the same. At the time, there were what I would call 3 operators, an operator either being a hygienist or a dentist. There were days where we would have 2 hygienists and 1 dentist, and days where we had 2 dentists and 1 hygienist. And it's essentially the same now.
Okay. And you're seeking to modify the condition to permit what's currently happening, where you have some days you have two dentists and 1 hygienist, other days you have one dentist and 2 hygienists.
That's correct.
Okay. Can you talk about the impact on parking, comparing, dentist a dentist appointment schedule versus a hygienist appointment schedule?
Yeah, we had some discussion with Mr. Sibilia, and he suggested bringing in copies of the schedule, which I did do, and it'll show that the typical appointment for a hygienist, the length of the typical appointment is about 45 minutes, whereas for a dentist, it's usually a little bit longer. And the dentist usually sees less people in the day than the hygienist. The point being that it's likely not to increase any of the volume or patient flow.
Okay. I'm going to just hand out the exhibit that you brought with you. And copies to the board. Just go through this very briefly. A1, Tommy? Okay, exhibit, okay. Paul, just explain briefly what, this is various pages.
Yeah,
Tell the board what it is.
I apologize for the order. My admin did it, not me. At the top, you will see a heading. One says DR, the other says HYG. DR stands for doctor, HYG stands for hygiene. And the slots are self-explanatory in terms of the time. And what you see there is the procedure that's being done. Prophy, periodic, 4 bite wings prophy, under the hygiene column is a typical cleaning appointment. On the doctor's side, it varies according to what is needed.
And at the bottom of each page, you've
It was summed up
some notes.
by my admin as to how many patients were seen that day by both the doctor and the hygienist.
Okay.
I'm sorry, you should note that some days have 2 hygienists, so you may want to cut the hygiene number in half, to be fair.
Okay. But that indicates that, on any given day, the hygienist would see more patients than the doctor.
On average, they do, yes.
Okay. So, have you ever experienced a parking problem during the 30 years you've operated in
No.
practice? Have you ever experienced a problem within the last few years on those days when you have more than 1 dentist working in the building?
No, we do rent 4 spaces across the street. It helps with that.
Okay. So, what you're asking for specifically is flexibility to allow for a total of 3 operators including a dentist and hygienist, which would mean you could have 2 dentists and 1 hygienist, or 1 dentist and 2 hygienists.
That's exactly correct. And the reason is, and I hope I can do this, is that when I had my event, there was an associate to carry on the practice. Otherwise, the practice may have gone under. The staff may have lost their jobs. And, well.
And you also, I think, are you also sort of thinking ahead towards retirement and the possibility of bringing a younger dentist in to eventually take over the practice and work with you?
That's precisely it, a smooth transition, because feeling my mortality, it's just a question of time.
Mm-hmm. For all of us. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, I think that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
I would need to look that up. I'm actually not sure off the top of my head.
If it helps, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, the prior approval, we indicated in the resolution that there were 18 parking
Right.
spaces required because there was a variance granted to permit 14.
Right.
One of the conditions of that approval also was the requirement to have 4 dedicated parking spaces on that area property that you referenced today.
So nothing has changed in terms of the size of the offices. This is just, and the condition on the prior approval was a reflection of what the testimony was at that hearing. So my one question is, there's currently a storage shed in the parking lot.
Yes, there is.
And I assume you would have no issue if we put a condition that that be removed prior to getting a CO for the expansion of the...
That condition has already been expressed by, help me with his name.
Richard Sherwin?
Thank you. Yeah, I had contacted him about that, and he said, yes, you could put it. He did not want me to put it past the side of the building, because I guess that qualified as the side yard, and that would be in violation, so that's why we put it in this parking space, the third one in. But that was a condition that would have to be removed prior to receiving a
Okay,
CO.
well, we're going to reiterate that, but
Yeah, that's fine.
if we're going to approve this, but, okay. Any other questions from members of the board? Any members of the audience with questions, statements, anything to say about this application? Mr. Trembulac, you do not need to sum up.
I'm not
Our
going to.
memories are capable of lasting 5 minutes.
I don't believe in summing up after 11 o'clock, so.
Okay, we'll start with Ms. Harris.
I'm in favor of this variance.
Mr. Church.
I'm in favor of this.
Mr. Simon.
I'm in favor.
Mr. Vieira.
I'm also in favor.
Mr. McCullough.
I'm in favor.
Mr. Caulfield.
I'm in favor.
Okay, I'm also in favor. I think we should have the condition read that there be no more than 3 professionals, and not get into mix and match of how you're going to do that, because I mean, and that the storage shed be removed prior to a CO for the addition, and that they continue to be obligated to have the 4 parking spaces at 161 Walnut Street, or
Or do you just want to carry forth?
Carry that condition.
Carry
as
forth
it's
all
read.
the other conditions, right?
Yes,
Yes,
yeah.
okay.
Someone want to make a motion?
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
If I may for
opposed?
1 minute, I'm sorry. I
Any
don't want to interrupt the
abstentions?
proceedings.
Go complete
Well,
your
well,
addition and...
I'm sorry? The last time I was here, I tried to express this, but there was an intermission, and maybe it was a bathroom break, most people left, but this is the 3rd time I've been before this committee, and the only consistent face I see is the chairman. But you've always treated me fair, I have to say.
I hope everything works out and get the addition done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are they still here? Okay.
It's the last one.
Yep. They threatened him. The next application is that of Nicholas Taft. It's an application to construct a 2-story addition to property at 8 Argyle Road. The property is in the R1 one-family zone. It's designated township tax maps as Lot 91 and Block 4601. Proposal requires a variance from Montclair Code Section 347-45B1 to allow a front yard setback to the addition of 22.63 feet where 27.60 feet is required, and a variance from Montclair Code Section 347-45C1 to allow a side yard setback to the addition of 6.35 feet where 10 feet is required, and a variance from Montclair Code Section 347-45C4 to allow a principal structure to have a width of 0.9% of the lot width, whereas a maximum of 65% is permitted. Are taxes paid, and is the notice in order?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, would both of you, who's going to speak? Are both of you going to speak, or one of you?
Nick is going to introduce himself and why we're doing this, and then I'll run through the plans.
Okay, so Mr. Taft, would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
Yes, I do.
And your name and address, please, for the record?
Nicholas Taft at 8 Argyle Road, Montclair.
Okay, and you're the architect for the project, is that correct?
Correct.
Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
I do.
State your name and address.
Val DiGiacinto, and I'm at 48 North Main Street in Boonton Township, New Jersey.
And you're a licensed architect in the state of New Jersey, is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Your license is in good standing?
Yes.
All right, I'm going to swear in Mr. Scabilio. Also, would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
I do.
You may proceed.
We are a family of four with two kids who are quickly becoming teenagers, and our house is we're looking to kind of expand our living space as our family gets older, and we've been fairly limited as well, and especially now that both of us often work from home. So we're looking to kind of to expand our living space, and as well as not having to share one shower, which has definitely been a limitation. So yeah, we are, and looking at some of the other houses in the neighborhood, they've done similar expansions, actually often on a larger scale than what we proposed, we're looking to add an office space on the lower level for an in-home office, converting a covered porch into an office space, and then creating a master bedroom, not an additional bedroom, but turning the new space on the second level into a master bedroom, and then shuffling the rest of the rooms around so that we have more living space and an actual closet. So, yeah.
Okay, so it's a beautiful neighborhood, and particularly a beautiful street right near the park. So it was important to Nick and Deborah to stay in the area. They'd much rather work with this existing house and fix it up and add to it so they can stay in the neighborhood. So there are some existing nonconformities. Being on the cul-de-sac, we're sort of the first house in the circle, so it kind of puts us at a slight disadvantage relative to front yard setback. The house next door is actually further forward significantly, but just because of the circular cutout, that's where our shortcoming is on the front yard setback. Additionally, because of where the house is located on the site, there is no existing 10-foot side yard setback, which is required. So I guess basically anything we do to increase what's there is going to require a variance. Additionally, the house does not meet the 65% width. And I would suggest that most of the houses on the street already are non-conforming regarding that. I'm sure the houses were all built before the zoning ordinance was in place, and they did not comply. So I think you can probably see that on the Google Earth sheets, particularly one that was given out today. There are many houses that are similar or greater width. So anyway, so our approach to doing this was to slightly increase the width of the, basically demoing the existing screened-in porch and then building a new two-story structure there. We wanted to basically minimally increase the width to just a sort of a minimal acceptable size for a primary bedroom. So the interior space is less than 11 feet in what we're proposing. Regarding where the front wall is located, it's essentially where the old wall was. We've fractionally moved it back just so we were trying to make a point to not increase the number of that front yard setback, decrease it rather. So although the bulk of the structure is increasing, the nonconformity, the number itself is actually, fractionally better. And then, it is deeper certainly than the existing covered porch, but the rear yard setback is a non-issue. So on the first floor, as Nick said, we basically are proposing an in-home office, with everybody working from home. And on the second floor, it was just imperative for them to get a proper primary suite for some privacy and a real bathroom for them and adequate closet space and privacy. So I guess if you want to look at the elevations, I mean, we want to do something simple and complementary to the Center Hall Colonial. So aesthetically, we centered the addition on, if you look at the side elevation, it's symmetrical about the main ridge line of the house. It's slightly smaller in width and height. And just trying to be complementary with the windows and window placement. Additionally, not having anything to do with the variance, but to increase curb appeal and just give yourself some covering to come in, we're slightly increasing the size of the front stoop, and we have added a bracketed covered entrance. So I think that's about it as far as describing the project.
Mr. McCulloch, do you have any questions?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Mr. Caulfield?
Did you look at expanding over the garage?
Well, we did. That would have been problematic because it would not have given us the in-home office on the first floor, and then it would have, so that basically would have created two separate projects. So, for budgetary reasons, as well as just the general layout of the second floor, we felt that this was the better way to go.
Yeah, we're also on the other side of our neighbor has built very, very close to the property line, so we don't want to really expand out anymore on that side, because it would be a very extremely close between the two properties.
Yeah, if you look at the second page of the Google Maps, you'll see our house is the blue house, so the house to the right of that it's really kind of massive and kind of looming over our house.
Yeah, so we want to kind of which I think would kind of offset the other house, a much larger house to the side, and by building over the screen porch instead of the garage.
Can you just speak to the fact that, the side yard setback that you are going to take 2 feet back? Can you speak to, very hard to sometimes board to just give you that. Can you tell us why?
I understand. So, I think, generally speaking, if this was a new development, there's no way that, I feel like it's undersized, and I think the evidence of that is that it's likely that almost every house in the street is non-conforming by the width percentage. So, and there are other houses that have been, as you can see in this image, sort of massively added to. We're not doing anything, remotely approaching that scale, and we were very sensitive to, again, keeping this to just a minimum width that basically is usable. If this is really any narrower, it's going to become not worth doing, really. And it's, I think we were trying to be as sensitive as possible. And because there's not an existing 10-foot side yard setback, I know the zoning ordinance reads a certain way and it has to be looked at that way, but basically, what if the other side was supposed to be the 10-foot side yard setback, if that makes sense, you know what I mean? Like, we're achieving the 6-foot setback, so we made sure we did that as well, if that makes sense.
Ms. Harris?
I just want to confirm that you're not making any changes or modifications to the front yard setback. You're putting the wall exactly where it is now?
It's actually, it's fractionally further back, just to make sure that because it's wider, that intersection point, if we had it at the exact same line, it would have been closer to the street, but we moved it back, inches, just to make sure that didn't happen.
Okay. And you're expanding the width of the house, is that 2 feet?
It's about 2 feet, yes.
About 2 feet, okay. Thank you.
Mr. Church?
No question.
Mr. Simon?
No questions.
Mr. Vieira?
Any impact on the height of the structure?
No, the addition is lower than the main roof, which is also conforming, so the height is not an issue in this property.
Thank you.
Okay, currently, you have evergreens along the east side of the porch, which are obviously going to have to be removed. What are you proposing to put between the addition and the neighbor's property to the east in terms of landscaping?
Yeah, we are thinking of kind of doing kind of like low-lying kind of shrubs instead of like tall trees like before. The reason we planted those is just since it was just a completely open screen. It was kind of a lack of privacy, and yeah, we currently have a hot tub as well on the screen porch, which will also be removed. But yeah, we will be kind of doing some landscaping around that area, which I think is actually going to really improve it significantly from its current state, which is mostly just a privacy screen. So,
I'd also just like to add to that, because the existing structure on that side is just a screen porch, there's basically zero privacy. We're just having 2 windows on the first floor on that side, so the privacy part of it is somewhat handled already just by the structure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then there's a large, I think, rhododendron that's in front of the porch. I assume that has to be sacrificed in this. I don't know that I care. I'm just trying to understand. I mean, there.
I think logistically, construction-wise, we could make all attempts, but it's it's unlikely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we might, we might try to move it to a different section of the, and then into the backyard if it's movable. But
I suspect its size is going to make that unrealistic.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but it looks like there's a small Japanese maple in front of the house, actually, and then there's a large dogwood closer to the street. I mean, it looks like those can be protected.
Yeah, unfortunately, the Japanese maple is no longer there. It contracted a disease and had to be removed, unfortunately.
Okay. Just to do this.
Wait, hold on, I have just one quick question too. What's happening with the fireplace? Is that
Okay, so
being
no,
put
it's
out of?
good question. So it currently functions as a fireplace, and it also is a flue for the appliances. So we're going to convert the appliances to direct vent or electric, and then the fireplace will be converted to direct vent gas. We are recreating the chimney on the roof basically out of wood frame with thin brick veneer to match existing. So the second floor chimney is coming out. We'll deal with whatever flue has to come in, minimal flue for if we have to go up that way, we might be able to go out as well. The first floor fireplace and chimney is staying.
Okay.
Does that all make sense?
So the first floor chimney, is it being converted to electric?
It's being
or
converted to gas.
To gas.
Direct
okay.
vent gas.
Direct
So
vent.
it's either going to go
out of the
up
side
or out the side, hopefully, yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're also planning on converting most of our appliances and heating and cooling to away from a steam furnace. So yeah, there won't be. I don't think there'll be much really exhausting out of that area.
Any other questions from members of the board? To do the any members of the audience who are hiding behind the chairs who have any testimony, questions, anything you want to say about the application? Anything further the two of you want to say before we discuss and vote on the application?
No, thank you.
No.
Okay, start discussion with Mr. Church.
Yeah, that's a difficult neighborhood to expand in. But I can see the need to do it. I'm in favor of the application. I have no major problems with the application, so I vote in favor of it.
Mr. Simon?
I'm in favor.
Mr. Vieira?
I'm also in favor, considering that some of the, I guess the dimensions are already non-conforming, and you're not doing any changes to the front yard setback. It's really the width of the structure, and you're only increasing that by 3%, which is already non-conforming. So I'm in favor.
Mr. McCulloch?
I'm in favor.
Mr. Caulfield?
I'm in favor.
I'm also in favor. I think they've demonstrated that even though, oh, Ms. Harris.
I'm in favor also.
I'm sorry. I totally lost where I was. I'm in favor. I think even though they're reducing the side yard setback on the east side, I think they've demonstrated the need to make a functional bedroom on the second floor. And and that also justifies the building width variance, and front yard is what it is, and it's due to being on a cul-de-sac, and they're not worse, they're slightly improving that condition. So I guess that we should have a condition that they put landscaping, which I'll leave totally up to them, between the addition and the eastern side yard.
Stormwater meters.
And then the stormwater be designed so as to not impact the neighboring properties. Well, say that, and Tommy, I guess you should start alerting us when we get applications that are subject to the new ordinance.
Yeah, I mean, if impervious coverage is a required variance, that'll be in the report.
But, it's
We haven't gotten any of those yet. Actually, we do have one in May.
okay. So just so I'm saying, just so board members and me in particular know, okay, this was submitted before that, and that's why, when we're getting one old ordinance, one new, just so we don't start asking questions about their impervious cover,
Right.
which aren't relevant if they were filed before.
Okay, understood.
Someone want to make a motion?
Move the approval of the application.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
With
Aye.
the conditions we discussed.
With the conditions, yes.
Any opposed, any abstentions? No. It's worthwhile that you stayed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank you guys for staying too.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Is this anyone's bag, by the way?